Welcome, Flickin' fans, to our review of The Sandman on Netflix. Thank you for joining us as we leave the waking world and enter the dreaming. Home to dreams, nightmares, and adorable gargoyles. Grab your sand pouches and mystic rubies, and let's break down the first season of Neil Gaiman's The Sandman.
We're just going to wait until Jess realized that he muted himself.
Yeah. I didn't mute myself, actually. The video continued to play for an extra 10 to 15 seconds. Anyways,
yeah.
Hey, everyone. That's what happens. We're trying to stream at 1080p, and my computer is sobbing into the floor right now. Thank you so much for joining probably my most anticipated review that we've done since at least the Batman. Introductions real quick. You should know Sean Wingblade up there in the top left corner, depending on which side of the screen you're looking at. And we got Mr. Geoff Alterman in the other corner. And introducing to Flick and Reel, Shane Lemmons. Say hi, Shane.
Hey, guys.
Me and Shane go back several years. We used to read some comic corners and go comic book shopping. And I remembered him saying something about Sandman once. So when I knew this was coming, I was like, hey, you should come on and we should geek out about Sandman. So we've just been texting each other back and forth, getting real hyped.
Oh, yeah.
I grew up with friends that wanted to read with me.
I mean, I would read it quite a bit before he did, but
it's true. By a couple years.
Yeah.
He was reading Sandman, I was reading Saga, and then
still
I have now read Sandman, and you have not read Saga. No. So who's winning now?
Maybe Saga's the next one I'll jump into.
I mean,
I want to jump into Saga, but I know it's still not done. There's so many other stuff.
Well, they just started.
They just started.
No, they just restarted after the huge hiatus or whatever. So
I'm waiting for the first new volume to come out because I'm a volume reader. I don't collect issues very often, so I will hop into that soon. But they do have an omnibus though, so once you have an omnibus of something, you can start it. I think. I know it's not done, but it'll take you a little bit to get through that. Probably.
I still have 9 hours left in Act 2 of Sandman. So I still got some time, but I can probably finish that this week.
Yet, but
I can't do audiobooks. I need to be I need to be doing a long drive to listen to an audiobook, I guess. And
they're great at work.
Well, yeah, I do
watch. I work from home, so I watch stuff normally.
Yeah,
as I'm working.
Right. Anyways, we got so many various things to talk about and sections of the show and things, but we have all watched the entirety of season 1 of Neil Gaiman's The Sandman. We're going to start out without getting into any spoilers, but there will be heavy spoilers in the back half of this review, so you have been warned. But let's start out with how we all got into Sandman, our past experience with Sandman, Shane being the guest, and maybe the first of us to read. Actually, Geoff might be the first that's read Sandman chronologically. Geoff, do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I mean, let's confirm. I read in 2013. Did anyone else read this before 2013?
No.
No.
Okay. All right. So I guess I'll go first. And I'll try to keep it brief, but it might be a little wordy just because. So for me, it's weird. I knew of Neil Gaiman. I like the ideas behind a lot of his stuff and whatnot, but I never really read much. By that time, the only thing I really was familiar with was that I loved the Matthew Vaughn movie Stardust, which came out in 2007. Really enjoyed that movie still.
I keep forgetting that's Matthew Vaughn.
Right.
And I mean, come on, he has that whole relationship with Mark Strong being in all his movies, basically.
Yeah.
And he was that one. But in 2013, I was home from school that semester, and then my favorite teacher in high school passed away from cancer. and myself and some other friends went to the funeral, and then afterwards we're all just kind of like doing whatever. I think we went out to lunch, and we decided to just go to the Barnes and Noble that was near my house. And I was looking at the comic section, graphic novels and everything, and I just saw the Sandman there on the shelves. And it was each of the 10 volumes, 1 through 10 altogether. They didn't have the box. They just had all 10 individual volumes. And I said, screw it. And I grabbed all 10 and I bought all of them. Didn't know what it was about. I knew it was Neil Gaiman and I like Stardust. And I was like, you know what? I know that. I think at the time I knew of Sandman because there was like a Time 100 greatest books of all time. And the only graphic novel comics that were on there were Mouse. If you know of Mouse, the World War II allegory.
It just got banned.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
And then Watchmen, which I had read, and then this. And I was like, well, this is the only other thing, and I see all of this here, and I don't have anything going on. So I got it, and I got all of them. And I read all of them that whole summer, and I went with my friend who was there who was driving around that makes it license. And we went to New York that summer when The Ocean and the Lane came out for a book reading. And so I got to meet Neil Gaiman briefly, and he signed a copy of Dream Hunters as well. And I was like, oh damn, he keeps signing stuff for people. And whenever he gets bored, he draws funny little ghosts in his signatures. And he did a ghost to the person right in front of me. I was like, fudge! I was so close to getting a ghost in my book. Anyways, that's like what my experience with Sandman, and I love it. I have like pretty much all of them, and to get ready for the show, I was looking for all my volumes, and they must be at my parents' house. And I moved we bought a house in the last 7 months, so we moved, and I guess I didn't ever take those because there was enough room in the apartment. Couldn't find them in my house, so I just bought the 4, like the Netflix bound volumes. I wanted to just buy them to cover season 1. I'm like, yeah, that'll be good. And in my mind, I'm like, I can't just have one part of a volume series when the other one's right there. So now I have 2 copies of the entire series in volume form.
Gotta pass those on to somebody else to enjoy.
That's beautiful and funny.
Mm-hmm.
Jesse, you have them on your shelf, right? They're over there behind you.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's right, right there. But they're holding up some DVDs. Otherwise, I'd grab them. But like half of the shelf would fall over. So
I think the one thing that bugs me is I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the Death, the High Cost of Living collection I have, that's hardcover. Everything else I have is soft cover. So that bugs the hell out of me as a collector. Otherwise, I love it.
All right, Shane, walk us through.
Oh man. So I come at it from a slightly different angle. I grew up a Batman kid, so DC comics were always prevalent in my life. Loved Hellblazer, John Constantine, so I was always kind of Sandman adjacent. I knew of the comic, didn't really find the time to read it or go out and search them out until I think like 5 or 6 years ago now. I was familiar with Neil Gaiman's novels, Ocean at the End of the Lane, Neverwhere, all of those books I really love. So I finally gave it a shot.
Neverwhere had a BBC show, right?
Yeah, it did.
Okay.
Not a great one, but they did it. So I finally jumped in and I've read all of it now. I'm a big fan of the Lucifer spinoff series as well, which is very different from the TV show that we've gotten, but it's still enjoyable. But yeah, love the character of Dream, love the idea of all of that stuff. Yeah, it's one of my favorite comic books, and I recommend it to everybody, just like everybody recommended it to me when I was getting into comic books.
And yeah, is that it?
Yeah, short and sweet.
Okay,
I could ramble on for too long if I
I ramble on too long, so but
I'll try to keep it kind of short, just 3 little chunks here. I heard about Sandman so many times because of the circles of podcasts I listen to and stuff, whether it be like Collider Heroes, the Coy Jean Drew, and rest in peace, John Schnepp, those guys. I would frequently hear about the Sandman, but I didn't really have my my point in. As much as I like in reading comics, I was always somebody that would just like all of a sudden read a whole bunch of comics and then like not for a year, and then all of a sudden read a whole bunch, and like so it's hard for me to get into Sandman. And then I saw an Instagram ad for Audible, and I was listening to a lot of books on Audible, and it said The Sandman, James McAvoy, Kat Dennings, Jeffrey Wright, John Lithgow, Andy Serkis, Michael Sheen. I was like, yeah, sure. Like I could read me the dictionary. That sounds great. And within the first couple like chapters that they covered in the Audible, I was absolutely hooked. And it was one of the most like visual experiences I had in my imagination that was just brought on by audio. It's fantastic. And then much like with Dune that I experienced through Audible as well, it became like my next obsession. And I started ingesting it in every way that I could, started following every set photo, everything that came out about it, casting. And for at least the last 12 to like 18 months, I've been completely obsessed with The Sandman. And then we got here.
Can confirm
as somebody that has known me for 12 to 18
also
months.
Being one of the people that suggested you read it back in the day.
So anyways, that's my story. Sean, you're the newest one in this venture.
Well, I can confirm he's been obsessed because that's all I've heard about for the last year that I've known Jesse, that I've had the pleasure of knowing Jesse.
The hype has been real for a while.
You should listen to this. It was that and Saga, to be honest. Every time we were on the thing and he's recommending anything, it was that and Saga. But you know what? He's not wrong about the Audible presentation. And so I picked that up and it was great. And like I mentioned earlier, I'm halfway through Act 2. And there's more, hijinks and adventures to go on with the Sandman and his various characters. A lot of which we see in, this first season, which we see in the first act. And many of it stays true to I'm guessing the comics, but definitely the Audible, though they do change some stuff. But it was cool seeing the difference because I'm not typically a comics reader. I'm not typically like all of my comparison tools for most Marvel or DC stuff is to cartoons that I watched growing up, like the Batman animated series, Superman, Justice League, X-Men, Spider-Man, cartoons growing up in the 90s and the 2000s. So I'm like, oh, that story they kind of did a little bit in the cartoon version, like something in the MCU or something in the DCEU. So being so fresh and recent, listening to the Audible and comparing it like within the last 2 weeks, I finished the Audible and started it too. I finished it very quickly. I listened to the whole thing within a week, and then comparing it directly to this adaptation on screen, it was like, oh, cool. You can imagine it, just like side to side. And they did a great job. And yeah, the Audible version was a huge task to not only live up to, but overcome if they wanted to try to, shine as the superior, piece or whatever. And they did a great job. It sounded great. And you think listening to it, you're hearing James McAvoy's voice for 13 hours in your head for the entirety of the first season.
Can't go wrong with 13 hours of McAvoy in your
True. But I think Tom Sturridge did a great job. And I couldn't have imagined anyone else as the character, but he, especially by the end of the show, like he is Morpheus. He is the Lord of Dreams. He did a great job. So overall, I do like it. Love it.
So you've never read the comic books?
No, I haven't read most comic books. I haven't read a lot of comics in general, but definitely not these. Just listen to the audio.
I'm someone who's definitely read like a bunch of various graphic novels and stuff. But for a lot of them, I tend to have read them after the big adaptation came out. Like I've read a lot of Batman graphic novels, but it was like after a lot of the movies come out. And not saying like, I think something like, Batman is inspired by like the Batman is inspired by, a combination of various stuff, including like Long Halloween, maybe Dash of Hush and stuff like that. It's like I've read those 10 years ago. So I'm up on that. But like Batman is so all-encompassing, like things like that, like I don't really count that sort of stuff. Something like the Sandman, which is so singular, like there are 2 times it's something like completely singular I've actually been like read up on in its entirety before a thing came together. The Sandman and Preacher. I never finished Preacher.
No. The show or the comics?
The show feels like the show. I never watched the final season. I always mean to do it just for the sake of completion in me, but like that show went. Now this is actually a great contrast. Actually, those two shows,
sure,
that and Sandman, because the Preacher took its own path with its adaptation. Cherry picking pieces, of this,
much like The Boys.
A lot of original stuff. Yeah, I never read The Boys, so I can't comment on the adaptation, the faithfulness. But like they cherry picked and did a lot of stuff on their own, which as someone who really loved what was on the page, it bugged me. But how to work on the show, I haven't finished it. So that's basically. I mean, like if I haven't wanted to finish it and it's been done for a while, and it's only 4 seasons, like that kind of says what it needs to say. It was a disappointment after kind of an.
But 4 seasons is a lot.
4 seasons, yeah. But the show, the comic was a road trip story, a lot of it, and the show was let's stay in one place each season. It was weird, but what I'm using that to just say, like, as a way, I guess, to help dive into, talking about it. Just very briefly, the one thing I'll say is like, but not even talking about quality, like. I am surprised at how remarkably faithful this show is.
Well, I want a really quick transition because I feel like that's where you're hinting at. I want to move on to our non-spoiler review, so we can all just take like a couple minutes at most and just overall thoughts about the whole show before we start going into details. So I'll bump that banner up right there.
That's why that's why the first thing I was saying was just that was remarkably faithful. So without even speaking of the quality of the show, the fact that the comic book, which has been known to be like hard to adapt, if not, one of those
many failed attempts,
like unfilmable books. Basically, it has visuals, but how do you translate a lot of that on screen? And also the ideas. It's the comic book series isn't just like a lot of forward momentum action story.
A lot of ideas.
It's a lot of asides and random just stories. Sometimes they go nowhere. They're just a funny thing, and it's just sort of the way Neil Gaiman's prose kind of works. But somehow, for the most part, I'm not going to say it was a perfect season. Like very rarely are things all perfect, but I am surprised at how much I liked the show as a show, while it still kept that basic format from the comic, because it never felt like, in my mind, I was like, they're going to change stuff around for the sake of story. And they did a little bit in some place, but somehow they took something that felt like it only really worked on the page and made it work on screen by taking that anthological approach to the storytelling, where it's like, yes, there are bits and pieces, and I think the anthology approach of the stories, it works and it doesn't in different ways for the season. I think the individual stories are right. I don't know if necessarily an anthological approach works for trying to convey a season-long arc that they might be trying to do. It felt very like chunk. Like this could have been one of the rare times, and that's not necessarily the show's fault either for some of it. Netflix could have maybe released the show instead of calling it seasons. They could have done what they do with other shows. They do like volume 1, volume 2, volume 3. They could have actually done that and broken it up in more episodes, like less episodes volume, to make it feel more like they're all arcs. But overall, I was very happy with this. I was surprised also at a lot of things, especially now made during COVID. There's a couple people standing in a room and everything around them is obviously computer generated, and that happens
or volume.
But there are times where the volume and stuff, and that happens sometimes here. But there are other things that happen in the show where I'm like, this looks, the way that they're able to make this look for the most part practical in a lot of ways, I found to be just like kind of like, gorgeous. It was great. There were so many things I liked. I'm gonna keep it short here and let you guys talk before I just. Yeah, I said I'm done. So that.
You're done.
So, I thought you froze.
You completely froze.
Froze for a second.
Oh no! I said I'm going to keep it short so that way. Otherwise, I will keep talking. I picked up my cup and had a drink. Did any of that get shown?
That you froze on the cup. I didn't realize that was the end of your sentence.
Great. Off to a wonderful start. So I will. What I want to do is I want to let everybody else talk, and that'll keep me from rambling because I don't want to repeat things that you guys said. So I'm going to let Sean hit it up, and then Shane, and I'll go last.
I mean, to keep it, as non-spoiler, my only gripe of the show is that I wanted more time with all the characters, and because they keep it, there's sections where you spend time with. Obviously, you have your main character that's throughout the whole thing, but there's sections where you spend time with these characters for like an episode and a half, and then you move on to the next characters for an episode and a half, and then and because they're on a trip and they're trying to get to the destination. Not every character is along the ride for the whole ride, essentially. So I would have liked, I think, if they would have maybe sectioned it off more, like the entirety of the first season could have been the first 2/3 that we see, and then save the second half of the season for a season 2, or like Geoff, like what you just suggested, the second volume, kind of like maybe what Stranger Things did, right? We got the 2 finales, which was
like
essentially
film it all, but then release it like a month later.
Exactly.
Lord of the Rings was all filmed together and then released in 3 pieces. So,
or just spend more time, because on it, like I wanted more time with, David Thewlis's character. I wanted more time with with Charles Dance. I wanted more time with all these. A lot of well-known names who are playing 1 episode or 2 episodes, and I just wanted more. I wanted, like, I loved it so much that I wanted more of it. So it's not a detraction. It's just that I need more of it, and we're not going to see some of those characters ever again because their storyline is wrapped up. And so, that's my only detraction. But overall, like, I loved what we did get, and in listening to it at first. And I told Jesse this too, like in listening to that whole first section, essentially the first episode, like I was like, that could be a whole season on itself. Like you could really this could be a mystery and kind of draw it out. Like all this time jumping stuff.
The first one?
Like even the first episode, when I'm listening to it, I was like, this could be a whole season. Like that first chunk of section before he ever gets, let off into the world.
Especially if they pulled Overture into it, which was the prequel, which is it goes into, without spoiling it, we'll talk about it later. There's a bit in the very beginning season of that first episode that is a change from the actual comic itself.
Mm-hmm.
And it does pull it almost is like they could have had all of the story Overture, which is the original, which is on paper the lead up to the and it's not a spoiler to say his capture in his
sure.
There, and they could have had all that in the beginning. I agree. I just want to deal with it more.
Yeah, and I didn't hear that in the audiobook, so the whole first chunk. Someone mentioned that I'll just plug my reaction when I was reacting to it. Someone mentioned that in that section of the reaction, like, oh, they changed this from the comics. No, apparently it was just something I hadn't heard of. Exactly what you just said. It was a prequel or a epilogue. What did you say? Prologue.
Prologue.
So I don't know where I was going with that. I wanted more of it. That was my non-spoiler review.
Yeah.
I loved it so much that I wish we would have spread out the first 6 episodes.
You wanted 2 scoops instead of 1. I hear you.
Sure. and make those first 6 episodes into 9 or 10, and then give me 4 more on the end, like a month later. That would have been great.
Mm-hmm.
Shane?
So I kind of agree. I think they did a fantastic job building the world of this show, where they make you want to stay there and spend time with those characters. But I will say, and this also is an issue with the comic book, at least in my eyes, is like when you start it, you're kind of just like dropped in, and it can be kind of confusing for people who may not be familiar with it.
Disorienting a little bit.
Yeah. So like that whole story in the beginning could have been drawn out, but I think they would have had to do a little bit more world building before that. But overall, the show was great. I didn't run across any changes that I bumped into that really were like jarring or anything. Tom as Dream is fantastic. I can't wait to see him as the character again, hopefully. The way that he played that character is like perfect. Like James McAvoy did great in the Audible, but on screen he killed it. So I don't really have a lot to say. I really enjoyed the show, and I can't wait to spend more time in the Dreaming because it was fantastic.
I also, I mean, it's kind of a resounding bit of applause here. I think I love the show. I love the music. I think the casting was inspired across the board. No real weak performances. I thought everyone was great. I know that both Shane and Sean, you guys are saying it would have been nice to have more time with the characters, but something I appreciated is there was some characters that we got more time with in the show than we got in the comic, like Ethel Cripps, like the Corinthian was dropped in the story much earlier than he was initially, and that lets us get more invested in what's happening in the show. And I won't get into details, but I've described the Sandman series as taking all these like patches of quilt from the comic, because the comic is not linear storytelling. It's not very like, here's the line and it just goes all over the place, but it comes back to the center and it finds itself. And
it's very Jeremy.
Yeah. Even though it is broken up into, like you guys are saying, kind of like volumes, and that's how I have it broken up for our spoiler review. I have 1 through 5, 6 is on its own, and then 7 through 10. Right. But they found a through line, and they found a way to tie things together that weren't tied together before. So I find the show to be more coherent and more streamlined than the comic. And for this medium, I think it really succeeds in doing that. So, again, very few things are perfect, but I would give this as like a high 9 out of 10 for me. I mean, we'll get into reviews later, but just, without spoilers and stuff, that's my thoughts. But we are ready to dive into spoilers, so I'm going to change this ticker here for a little bit. And
Jesse, you said we got more of this guy?
When my computer catches up. Yeah.
Yes.
Boyd Holbrook.
Oh, man.
Not
so good.
AKA more of this guy? Thumbnail for episode 2.
Tell me why your mouth looks like his eyes in that photo right there.
That was the whole point. Every time he goes to take his glasses off, I'm like, I gotta do this.
I almost wish they would have done it more, but it would have destroyed the mystery behind it.
Just want show me him eating an eye with his eyes. What
the effects for it though were crazy, because he'll take them off. And I'm like,
and they
hold
talk.
on, did I just see?
Yes.
Did I just see normal eyes? Because when he first takes his glasses off and he's looking down so much, I'm like, hold on, wait, did I just see normal eyes? Did they just what's going on here? Forever, and finally,
they give him
like, oh nope, they're just eyes. They're just teeth.
And this is like cough. This is, it's spoilers anyways, but they gave his mouth, eyes, eyelids, which is some of the most unsettling things I've ever seen. Like he blinks,
and then when he's talking, the teeth also move as he's talking.
Yeah, and what I was saying is when he takes his glasses off, he's talking and he's looking down, and because of that, his eyelids are down. So it just looks like a normal guy talking until he looks up and it's just teeth.
So good,
which makes it feel more unsettling seeing it in action, which I appreciate, because the whole time I'm like, this isn't right, and which is a great feeling to have, looking at him and being like, you don't look right. Like this guy looked Uncanny Valley, but it's so funny because the way Uncanny Valley normally works for a lot of stuff is like everything else looks so good and the eyes look bad, and here and the eyes are what tell you apart from it. And here it's like, no, he's real, except his eyes. His eyes are fucked.
Yeah.
Amaru, that's because Geoff is competing with Matt for the worst internet. Matt Thomas. Yeah. And shout out to Amaru earlier. I was on his show, One Gotta Stay. It was a good time talking DC versus Marvel. So go check him out.
That never sounds like a good time.
That sounds like a fight waiting to happen.
Well, you know what? I didn't get my way, so I'm bitter too. So whatever.
Yeah.
All right, let's dive into our episodic discussion. We talked about it a little bit in the spoiler-free stuff, but we're going to this first section is going to be kind of open discussion with us, the chat, and everything about the first 5 episodes, which really encompasses the capture of Morpheus, his escape, and then his collection of his 3 items: the ruby, the pouch, the tools, and his helm. Yes, his helm of state. I'm just going to open the floor to you guys. What was your favorite bit in these first 5 episodes? What did you appreciate about the way that this was structured? Geoff, got some fingers.
As I started putting my hand up, I'm like, wait a minute, maybe I should let someone else go first because I'm jumping in and talking things.
I gotta structure what I'm going to say in my head.
You signaled. I'm going
you
did.
You rose your hand.
You were ready.
So I don't know who here watches Fargo, the television series, but in season 3, David Thewlis is the main bad guy. Is a guy named VM Varga, and he is just so. He is exactly the same for that whole season as is here, only without the supernatural abilities. And so the whole time I'm like, this is like one of the great TV villains. He came back. He's just pulling all that energy, and I thought it worked really well. I told Jesse this earlier. I took some things to make me smile when I was watching Sandman, and then it all hit when 24/7 began with the diner.
Rough.
He texted me and I said, "Oh, that's a bad time."
That is a bad time.
He said terrible. That. He's like, "Oh, that's a bad time." It was a great time. There's a lot of great stuff in those first few episodes, like of all sorts of stuff, but that whole diner sequence to me is so unsettling. Because you're watching it and everything feels it's weird. It's like everything feels so false. Like it almost feels like it's all so staged. Her being like, these are my favorite customers, and then they're all talking and almost acts. The way that everyone is acting in there makes it feel like everything is staged, like it's rehearsed, or the way to put it. It feels like what we're watching, the acting involved, there's nothing honest about these performances.
And I don't think they're supposed to be.
As the episode progresses and he starts making people honest, the performances themselves feel like they become more real as real people as it gets darker. And
it reminded me a little bit. Has anyone here seen Daniel Radcliffe's horns?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Cool.
I totally could see the parallels.
That's a poll that like I didn't know anyone's seen. Well, he basically gains like satanic powers, and one of the abilities he has is people just without thinking start telling the truth around it. And that's kind of what I was getting from the Ruby and from the diner scene. It was very uncomfortable, but with John D, something I liked is their portrayal of the amulet of protection.
Yes.
And anytime somebody has like malintent for the wearer, they explode / dissolve. And I was like, that's horrifying. I love it. I love it so much.
Just keeping on track with that episode, just the fact that they put that into the season blew me away, because reading the comic book and knowing how absolutely fucked up all that is, and the idea of watching it actually happen with real
pretty
people.
Bad listening to it with my imagination, at least, because I think Sean was having the opposite opinion. He's like, "Oh, listening to it's one thing, but seeing it's another." I was like, "Not with my imagination. The Audible was so much worse."
Yeah, but even the original comic book. Oof.
Yeah, I just mean you can imagine it. Sure, you can, and I've never touted myself as being very imaginative anyway. So what you're telling me is what it is, and you in the Audible too. They touch on it, and then they kind of skip over to the end where they're like, "Oh, we found 6 dead people in a diner." Like they don't go into the nitty gritty of, "Oh, they picked up the knife and stabbed themselves in the," like that was
the end where the cook was literally like cutting his hand apart. I was like, I can't believe we're seeing this right now.
Right. Oh, and that bit about it's not Beth. what was the
Bet.
Thank you.
Bet.
That guy and her son. I was like, oh, that's a terrifying addition that I hate a lot.
Right.
Yeah, that whole episode, like, you're just sitting in this uncomfortable pit and just watching the walls like melt around you, and it was so good.
They did such a great job with the filmography, the camera,
the colors
because
and stuff like that.
Yeah, they had this Dutch angle thing going on, which already makes you a little uneasy. You're like, that looks funny, but then they had this slow zoom on the eyes every single time it was cutting back and forth. They had this slow zoom, and like if you're ever talking to someone face to face, you don't just stare at their eyes the entire time. You kind of look around, you move around, you're you're drawn in on the center of the screen at this weird angle, and it just kind of makes you like you're just sitting there feeling weird about the whole thing. So it was a combination of everything.
The one thing I really noticed was how the lighting changed as stuff got crazier, because they would do all those crazy angles, but then the lighting was also getting more red, and they did a lot of greens, and it was just really like pulling you out of reality as these people just completely fell apart. I thought it was great.
Reminded me of the great scene in Spider-Man Homecoming when Vulture is talking to Peter in the car. And it's all red, and then as soon as he realizes that Peter is Spider-Man, like it goes green. Like they did a great job with playing with the background visuals. I love that stuff. To show you what's going on in their brain.
Or the lighting.
Go ahead.
What was your Spider-Man?
I was gonna say No Way Home. His spider sense when it starts traveling around the room and he's trying to figure out what's wrong, and that uneasy feeling. I think is really exponentially more so with that. Go ahead, Geoff.
Mine was Kylo Ren killing Han. The lighting in that scene.
Also a good pull.
We're talking about lighting. We're real critics.
On that long platform with no railing. Sorry.
Did you guys see the Andor trailer? And there's like some railings, and someone took a screenshot and said railings in Star Wars. Not my Star Wars.
Not my Star Wars.
I didn't see that. That's good.
That's great.
How did everybody feel about episode 4 with Lucifer Morningstar?
That was going to be when I got a point. 4's my favorite of the first 5.
Agreed.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought Hell was remarkably well realized. I did miss my boy Etrigan the Demon, for anyone that has consumed Sandman in any other medium.
I thought for half a second we were getting Etrigan, because as the demon walked up to the gate, he was rhyming.
Yeah,
I was like, are we about to see it? And it was kind of a letdown, but it was a means to an end. I get it.
And one thing that like didn't bother me, but you know how I was talking about how for first timers how the show must be, and not getting caught up in my own biases. When they introduced Nada briefly in Hell, I was like, okay, a lot of people with this being their first exposure to Sandman are going to say, what the F was that? Like, it's going to feel like a wasted moment.
It's not.
Until it's so fundamental for the next season or the next chunk of the storytelling with Sandman.
Absolutely.
Especially with what they allude to at the end of this season.
That's going to involve
Nada. They did a good job with their breadcrumbs throughout this season, really setting up the rest of the story, especially in episode 4, because a lot of the interaction with Nada is super important to the future of the story.
I honestly would love if that's how 2 kicks off.
With what?
With what?
With what?
Oh
no! What a cliffhanger! Maybe Jesse will come back.
Start off with Nada.
With Nada. To speak to breadcrumbs too, and we'll jump ahead past 5 to also episode 6, in the second half of 6, when he's speaking to Will Shakespeare, and that leads into a whole episode in Act 2 with another interaction with Shakespeare, with fairies, which also leads into the whole hell thing. There's so much that goes on, and exactly what Shane was just saying. They're trailing breadcrumbs and stuff like that. They did a great job.
Exactly. I thought that Gwendolyn Christie as Lucifer is a great casting choice.
Agreed.
It feels very much, oh no, we lost them. They'll be back.
They'll refresh.
Hopefully they're listening to, I thought that in like the tradition of, coincidentally, since John Constantine had a Constantine movie years, 17 years ago, and Constantine sort of one of the originators for a lot of the story stuff came from Sandman. One thing this movie or show, that movie in common, was having someone be a more like a almost like an androgynous version of a demon or whatever, because we had Tilda Swinton as Gabriel, I believe, right? It was Gabriel.
Yeah.
Correct. And time around, instead of Peter Stormare, I have Gwendolyn Christie. But like Gwendolyn Christie is this weird, like ethereal. You know what she gave off to me in the way, like she clearly knows her place. She knows she feels like like a smarmy Dr. Manhattan with the way that she spoke to people. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, sorry, I was talking to my kid. I muted myself.
I could see the kid. I saw the kid walk behind you, come back. So she played Lucifer like a smarmy Dr. Manhattan. His internet died. He'll be back very soon. But did you hear what I said this time?
An ethereal Dr. Manhattan.
Yeah, like a smarmy one, like one where it's like obviously she knows. She's like happy that she knows, like she like a smirk.
And he says as much too. I think talking to Matthew, I believe, like, is Lucifer, powerful? Oh, probably the most powerful being, save for the creator himself, type of thing.
Yeah,
and which is a line directly from at least the Audible or the comic itself, but not until Act 2 when he goes back to hell. We see him go back there, and so it was good of them to kind of set that stage. And this was slightly different from the comics too, because in the comics, he has his battle against Corazon, who had the helm, versus this one they decided to bring Lucifer into it to give them a little more something to do, which is fine, because in the comics, like, it was more, and I could just hear Michael Sheen's voice in my ears, like he's kind of like narrating what's happening versus actually being a part of it. So I thought that was really cool.
Right.
And we see that in like Game of Thrones too, where like, they're like, oh, choose your champion. And then obviously you choose someone beside yourself, someone more powerful than yourself.
Of course. I thought that was fun though, is a fun twist to make it Lucifer be the champion.
But I love the
Yeah,
hell yeah. And they're down to do it. I love the visuals too, because you can me listening to it and I can hear it, but they never described the visuals of it happening and then battling and then getting affected by the damage that they're doing to each other in this battle of wits, basically. And then too, at the very end, what's more powerful than hope? It's the most powerful.
What I thought was funny with that, while the battle is going on, though, one thing that ran through my head while watching was like, this is like that thing. It's like two kids that are arguing or whatever. It's like, oh, well, I'm rock. It's like well, you're rock. I'm paper. So I cover you. And it's like, yeah, well, I'm a fire and I'm gonna burn that paper. And it's like, yeah, well, I'm a water. I'm a wave. And I'm gonna put you out. It's like, yeah, well, I'm a big eye gun. I'm gonna freeze you. It's like two people that are just like, yeah, well, I'm this to beat you. Well, I'm this to beat, but it's like a way more dramatic version of that.
And visually too, because how boring would
dire wolf.
Well, how boring would that have been if they didn't act, if they were just like going back and forth type of thing. Now I went that one detraction too. I didn't think we needed Matthew to hop in and save the day type of thing with like a pep talk. But maybe give him a little more.
There is something that beats hope. What's that? It's politics.
I'm losing all hope with politics. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. That might be my first. That might be my favorite of the first 5 too. Because episode 5 was so unnerving, and this one was so cool towards the visuals.
I thought it was very cool. It's probably my favorite as well.
Yeah, episode 2 was like less happening, though. We did see a nice shiny baby golden gargoyle, with Goldie or Gerving, as Cain and Abel like to argue about their names. I thought that was funny too, Kane just keeps killing Abel over and over and over.
I think it's a very funny thing. One thing that I think one thing that works with the first half of the season, this 1 through 5, also is how there are a couple very specific things that are all put together there, which is, all right, well, Morpheus was trapped. First, there's a nightmare that's gone rogue. Corinthian. Great. He has there's like something that's the kickoff. It's like, this is a thing that's going to keep, this is the running thing. They put that one running problem of his at the beginning, but it's not like the biggest problem. But it is definitely a problem for him. And then he's locked up. And that's the whole first episode. And he gets out. And what I like is the rest of this half season is all, when I say anthological, like they all feel like these separate pieces, but they all come together because they're all adding to how he's able to get his things back, while also filling in, like kind of like shading in the sides of the world. Because I do agree with one of the things that Shane said, which is like, it just drops you right into the middle of it all.
Yeah.
And when it comes to a lot of fantasy stuff with world building, there's always that problem where it's like, how much is this going to need? How do you do exposition and make it interesting?
Right.
So,
well, what Cheryl's saying too.
That's exactly
Matthew's
what
kind
I
of
was saying. Matthew
to narrate, explain to viewers, and he even says as much, like, "Oh, I was just a person. Like he was like a shady person dealing drugs and stuff. Like, oh, what is all this? What is that?" So you always need that character to ask questions so it can be explained to them, which explains to the viewer.
I liked how Patton Oswalt was able to do some line readings, more dramatic stuff.
Fuck it, let's go to hell.
Also, he has a very specific like twang to his voice, like the kind of thing like that's like specific to like him and David Cross, which is why it was so great hearing the two of them like dub over voices and like Sorry to Bother You or whatever. But it found like sometimes him. Oh, hello.
And
hello, you're back
from outer space.
Yeah. Have you been listening at all to our conversation?
Yeah,
briefly.
A little bit. And
Okay,
I think we concur about Matthew. I like Patton Oswalt as Matthew, but I also got Andy Serkis in the Audible. And so that's one of the comparisons that didn't quite line up. Like Corinthian had two great performances, Riz Ahmed and Boyd Holbrook. Morpheus, good across the board. But
my issue with Matthew
is the Corinthian in the Audible.
Yeah.
Nice.
My issue with Matthew in the show, like I love Patton Oswalt, but every time he spoke, I feel like because his voice is so distinct and like
that's what he's just saying. When
he's using his normal voice, it took me out of it. It took me out of it.
He has
every
this
single
very
time.
specific voice that like he has this nasally twang to it that's like shared by like him and like David Cross. So it worked great. Like I was saying, when they were both doing the dub voices, or like the white people voice and Sorry to Bother You, like that sort of stuff works great. Here, he did some good dramatic line readings, but overall, it's like that is Patton Oswalt voicing.
His delivery was great. I just wish he would have like did some voice acting and changed his voice a bit.
Did a little something like,
which is great because he's done a lot of voice acting stuff, but it's always his voice.
We see him very briefly at the end, but you can tell Mervyn is Mark Hamill.
Yes, I was just telling
it's similar, but it's different enough.
I was just telling Jesse while we were gone.
The voice actor comes in with him.
Exactly.
It's sad we didn't get more Merv, but like if we would have just hired Mark Hamill to do both Merv and Matthew, it probably would have been a little bit more enjoyable to me personally.
Permit me another.
I think that Hamill absolutely could have blended in more.
Oh yeah.
Well, there was not a huge purpose for Merv. It could have been the same character, to be honest.
Which is a shame because Merv in the comic book is one of my favorite characters.
Yeah. To answer Cheryl's question too, or I guess Tracy answered it too, but I didn't know that, so I did.
Yes,
that's nice that they're jumping.
Do we need to go into a Matthew between like the Raven backstory?
Maybe another time. But
I can do it really quick for you.
It's cool that they're using different character or the same character from different like Justice League Dark, type of.
Yeah,
like,
it's
30 seconds. You have 30 seconds. Go.
So 30 seconds on why Matthew is Matthew. So Matthew the Raven is actually Matthew Cable from the Swamp Thing universe. Matthew Cable being Abigail or Abby's ex-husband in Swamp Thing. He gets into a car accident, goes into a coma, and he mentions how he dies in Sandman. Then he becomes a Raven.
There you go.
That's cool. Good to know. I want to touch on what Tracy said too, and I was going to bring this point up too, because of what Geoff had said earlier with the prologue of, you know, he's essentially going after the Corinthian. That's when he gets summoned away, which isn't in the Audible, so that's not something I knew about.
It starts in episode 1 and it finishes in episode 10. Like they gave a through line.
Yeah, the Corinthian stuff that they added was great.
Yeah, because we don't actually meet the Corinthian in the Audible until the serial convention. So this was the perfect way to essentially give like Roderick Burgess more knowledge than he should have had, you know, besides like reading a book that someone may have written about how to trap an endless creature. But it was perfect because it was obviously him trying to save himself, the Corinthian trying to save himself, going like, hey, let me give you a little tip. I'll give you a little nudge in the right direction. Here's what you got to do.
Dream another villain essentially to rub up against throughout the whole series. Like in the comic books, you didn't have that. There's no real definitive villains. And then
Corinthian was pulling all the strings, basically.
Yeah.
Well, I guess Desire was kind of pulling all the strings, but they were both, pulling the strings. Yeah.
The other thing, though, is since we're talking about 1 to 5, just something that I mentioned earlier, and then I'll try to keep it as quick as possible. That first scene of him talking to Corinthian and then immediately being like pulled away. Mm-hmm. So like that's new. That's new to the comics there because he just the comic starts with the ritual and he's immediately pulled in there. You don't know what
you don't see any part of what happened.
Overture talks about how he got a weekend straight.
Yeah. The way Overture had this whole other thing happening involving a vortex and all this other stuff, and the universe is like feeling like it's gonna fall apart, and like a version of Dream actually died and stuff. So he's meeting with like an infinite number of versions of himself to all deal with this issue, and it's all bizarre and crazy shit. So I also kind of understand. Exactly. There's a council of Ricks in it, but it's I get why they didn't put more mature at the beginning because it's like immediately it's like super cosmic weird stuff in that.
Well, and I feel like for Overture you need the context of the full Sandman story to really appreciate Overture. So
exactly. And the thing is though, the way it ends with him saving and like doing all this stuff, fighting against like the end of it all, like this all falling apart, and it weakens him, and the very end of Overture of him fixing all this shit, and he's finally done with this whole bullshit that he was pulled into that he didn't realize that he needed to take care of. It ends with him exhausted, and immediately that's when the Roderick Burgess ritual occurs, and that's how he immediately goes in there. The very final frame of Overture is that immortal frame of him from the comic that they recreated really cool in the first episode.
They recreated a lot of imagery in the first episode, especially
the one of him when he's finally out.
Doing the
just
thing.
Going up to the light. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense too. Because if they were just trying to summon an endless creature or being, and he was weakened, so he would be the most susceptible to being summoned and taken from whatever it is he was doing.
Yeah.
Perfect storm. Talking about episodes 1 through 5, I wanted to touch on 2 and 3 a little bit because we haven't really talked about those at all. I love that 2 was kind of all about the dreaming, introducing us to the dreaming, getting to meet Gregory the Gargoyle, having everyone's heartstrings ripped from their chest
immediately.
And that was, again, a change because I think it's a contract that Morpheus gets, or like something about like was the House of Dreams. Or not
House
Dreams.
of Mystery.
House of Mystery.
I forgot I didn't get a chance to read the review beforehand.
But it's basically a piece of paper he takes and absorbs, like regains some of his power. And this one, it's actually a dream that he's created that he has to absorb, which is Gregory. And it hurted. It hurted really bad.
I will kind of jump off of that. The amount of emotion that Tom is able to like put across, even though he's like this stoic, very cold character, really made me love him as Dream. Like you could see how unhappy he was having to do a lot of things in this, and the Gregory thing in particular.
He's Atlas.
I loved it.
He's Atlas.
Yeah.
He's got the world on his shoulders. He doesn't want to be. It seems like he feels he seems almost like he doesn't want to do this, but he has to.
Yeah.
And he has no choice, so he's doing.
Oh man,
Ambling brings up a great point. When I reviewed episode 2 for the first time, I said one of my favorite moments was the Fates. I love the Fates, and we get them a couple times throughout the season. And what's funny is I just watched Disney's Hercules about 4 or 5 days ago. So
how fitting!
Nice little tie in there.
Exact same Fates.
Rip Gregory, but at least we get Goldie.
I mean, Goldie was adorable. They had to give us something.
Could have kept him gurping.
If Tom Sturridge asks,
Oh, yeah.
it's
Tom Sturridge's body. Tom Sturridge's body looks like he's flexing everything at once.
I just think he lost weight down to his muscle, and that's what's left.
Yeah, like watching like some of those scenes in the first episode when he's in that ball, and then the end scene where he's actually like being released. I'm like, he looks unhealthily skinny.
Yeah,
like I feel like you shouldn't see somebody's like bone and musculature that.
Unless it's
the
Morpheus.
way that his body,
I mean, it makes sense.
The way that his body looks is like the way that his body looked. At least the way it was like framed and composed.
Oh man,
it was like you know how like what is it? I don't know how like if there was in a movie or something where it's like a muscle guy who didn't have skin, you could see like how tight all the muscle was on there. Like that's what he looked like. He looked like you could see like the obvious lines drawn around like that image. Like,
it was crazy.
He's ripped and yet he's like hardly even there.
I want to wrap up our 1 through 5 conversation talking about Joanna Constantine, because that was a bit of contention during casting announcements and stuff.
I don't know if you messaged me when it was casted as Joanna or not. I can't remember for sure, but I know me and all my other buddies were talking about it because it was a pretty big deal.
Because obviously in the original story it is John Constantine. However, Constantine. Neil's out there educating all of us that apparently it's been Constantine.
It's been Constantine since Alan Moore created him.
Yeah, well,
I don't even say it right.
It was Constantine in the show. It was Constantine.
Even Matt Ryan calls him Constantine.
So I don't know.
Anyways.
I also loved Joanna Constantine, which I'm gonna have to retrain myself. But she, or at least her ancestor, did already exist and was touched upon in this show in episode 6.
Yes.
And Neil explained why they made that change. Obviously, they are like distancing themselves from DC kind of as much as possible with the show.
Well, I don't think that was necessarily all his call because Constantine is supposedly wrapped up in other things.
Yeah. All right. They froze for a moment here.
The character. And,
there you go.
I enjoyed it.
You froze for a moment. I was afraid. You froze for like 10 seconds. I felt like I was about to have to try to vamp on my own.
Oh, we are in support of Joanna. And I enjoyed the episode.
Pretty much.
Yeah, she was great.
Joanna was John just as a woman. Like, she played it so well. The stuff that they changed.
She was about 15% nicer than John, I think.
Was she?
Like, she was snarky. John was an asshole.
True, she did not chain smoke, which
she did not chain smoke like a motherfucker. That's for sure.
Yeah,
she did not have 8 packs through the course of one episode
of 20 minutes. Yeah.
Who smokes more, Logan and his cigar, or Constantine?
Constantine. I
mean, there's a whole story arc in Hellblazer about him dying from lung cancer. So
I could tell you, man. Wouldn't have been able to. The worst part, I don't have access to be able to end the stream all of a sudden.
You know what was a really good effect in the episode 3 was that demon crawling out of the body.
Yeah.
Yes. That was a great effect. That's the kind of like wild effect that like when I was talking about green screen room stuff, like sometimes it's noticeable, but other times it's like that sort of thing that's just crazy great effects. That's a great effect. Merv is a great effect. The way he moves, and he seems way more like he's moving more like he's from Nightmare Before Christmas than he is.
Totally.
From,
We were
like,
talking about the stop motion side of that because when I first saw Merv, it was a little off-putting based on all the effects I had seen. But then I was like, that actually works very well for that character.
Mm-hmm.
And I love Mark. Effects, I think. It's one of Mark Hamill's more subtle voices because, you know, you got like Firelord, Ozai, you got the Joker, and...
Well, to be honest, Merv is just supposed to sound like he's working on
a blue-collar schmuck.
Yeah. Not super intelligent creature.
Just happens to be a pumpkin.
Yeah. And he cleans up the mess and the dreaming. That's literally his job.
The fact that he's a pumpkin is the most interesting thing about him. Otherwise, he's just a janitor, dude.
Exactly.
Call back to the first horror movie I ever watched, which was Pumpkinhead.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, at a friend's house years ago. I've been able to get some of that imagery out of my head.
Before we move on to the next chapter,
we did want to talk about Lucifer, and right as we started, we got bumped right off.
Yeah. I love Lucifer as a character and what they've done with it in the DC universe.
You can stop it. I love Lucifer. Hail Satan.
And outside of DC comics, like I'm a big fan of the Divine Comedy and different depictions of hell throughout the world. And the depiction of hell in this and Lucifer in this was like everything I could have ever imagined it being. And Gwendolyn Christie as Lucifer knocked it out of the park. If I remember correctly from the comic book, the battle that takes place happens between Dream and
Corazon
and the demon, not between Dream and Lucifer.
Which threw me for a second.
It threw me for half a second, but I was like, "This is going to be fantastic," and
it's the better move.
Yeah, totally.
It was one of the changes they made in the show. Where once they did it, you're like, "Why wasn't that the first instinct?"
Yeah. Well, and then it sets up the end so well too.
Yes.
But I love
you
all of that.
You cut out before. You cut out beforehand. Did you hear what I said about what I thought of that fight?
No, because like we just started talking about episode 4, and then we were gone.
Well, I heard you say it was a little bit of like a schoolyard argument between the two kids.
What I love about it is how epic it is, but it's just
how
like
small
kids
it is.
Well, I'm going to do this. Yeah. It's almost like, well, I'm a water gun. It's like, well, I'm a fire. I'm going to burn you down. Yeah, well, I'm a hose.
It's like two kids in their backyard, like with their sticks and pretending like it's swords and like trying to one up each other.
I'm shooting you. Well, I have an invisible shield that I'm going to stop. Oh, well, I have a shield deflector thing.
One of the choices they made that added stakes is every time one of them went up to the other, they took physical damage.
Which wasn't in the books either.
No, it wasn't.
And I love that too. The anti-life part where he's literally like fading away, I was like, that's so good because you're really thinking that like, wow, we're 4 episodes in and this could be it.
Yeah.
And you missed it. But Lucifer must have been a terrible leader of hell because there's absolutely, I made the joke earlier, so it's not going to have the same punchline or punch, but there's absolutely something that defeats hope, and it's politics. All you had to do is that. All you had to do is say that, and you would.
Yeah, I think for that battle though, Lucifer can't beat Hope because Hope is like literally. Well, yeah, but like Hope rules everything in hell because the whole point, like Dream said at the end, is what is hell without dreams.
Oh, and that is such one of my favorite parts of the comic.
I retweeted that because I think the Sandman Netflix Twitter tweeted that panel from the comic book. Right. I was like, it's one of my favorite scenes in comics.
When the San Diego Comic-Con trailer came out, the line from Lucifer's in it where Lucifer says, what power does Dream have in hell?
Or what power do dreams have in hell?
Exactly. And then it cuts to the next scene, and I was like, I'm waiting for his comeback, which is one of my favorite parts in that part of the story. But yeah, episode 4, fantastic. Top 2 episodes. Jonathan's back. Now it's probably time for Geoff to take a break. That's
I'm back.
Cycling through people.
Dinner had just gotten home. Okay. I was waiting for my kid to get out of cheer practice and bring.
Honestly, this is a good time to have everybody back because I'm very curious to hear everybody's thoughts on the next episode.
I think the general consensus, and everyone feel free to like chime in with what your favorite episodes are and stuff, but the general consensus on I'll say Sandman Twitter is that 6 was the best episode. You don't have to agree with that, and like I'm still like kind of debating whether it is or not, but it's great.
That episode, as it relates in the comic books, is probably one of the more sought after and loved comic books of the run.
And it gets its own category or topic or banner, however you want to do it. So episode 6, The Sound of Her Wings, where we are introduced to Kirby Howell Baptiste. I only know her from Cruella because I haven't seen The Good
I'm so
Place.
glad you know the names because I don't remember any of these people's names.
Yeah, I'll bring up a picture over here. But again, controversy because there's some people online that are just hateful idiots.
Jeff is obviously a white person. Obviously.
Yeah. White goth lady. Yeah.
Not, and here's the thing. The Endless are not
ambiguous at all.
White in the Caucasian sense. They are otherworldly.
Well,
colorless.
This is the thing with the Endless. They can be whatever they want to be. As we saw with Dream's interaction with Nada, he was not the Dream that we saw throughout the show.
Yeah. And the Endless are specifically whatever their viewer sees them as.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Desire had a tail at the end of the season, so I don't want to hear none of this.
Well, I mean, like, Desire is the perfect example of how weird people are about this because Desire is so very clearly a they, them. Yeah. And the amount of hate that people normally on the internet try to focus on, like, they didn't, like, I'm so glad they're not being assholes about that. And but this now?
I gotta put this up because I just saw somebody like this morning attacking Neil Gaiman and saying like, stop pretending like your show's not woke. Your announcement of the cast was woke and it has been from the beginning. And I had a mental breakdown about the whole.
What does that mean?
Because including their pronouns, they just got triggered by the pronouns.
Yeah,
because
that whole thing on the internet, I was so pissed about because these people all got greenlit by Neil Gaiman. Like, why are we questioning the creator of this stuff to begin with? Also, and then to just throw hate around was not cool in my book.
Unless I misunderstand, and I don't want to go on a whole tangent here, but unless I misunderstand the term, Sandman was woke in 1989. So,
yeah,
like, whatever you want to be upset about.
Well, I mean, Desire in the comic book, when it was coming out, was also not of one gender and never.
Gender identity is a repeating theme in the Sandman.
The exact dialogue from the Audible was, they are neither male nor female. Mm-hmm. That's the exact description of the character.
They're literally referred to, like, when it's like when so many of the Endless talk to each other, it's like my dear brother or my this that.
Yeah,
they say my sister brother or other sister.
Yeah, sister brother or sibling.
Sibling. Yeah. They use sibling a lot.
Like, it is that the use of Desire in the comic is one of, like, at least to me, of things that I pay attention to, an earlier example of pop culture media just using proper pronouns when it's not simply a he, she. Mm-hmm. Like, anyone can do it. Neil Gaiman did it before. So I'm glad that I know there is no controversy as far as I can tell. I'm just citing that as an example of, like, I'm so happy that that's not an issue, at least. It's stupid that now they're finding other things, which is so weird considering the obvious hanging fruit, like low-hanging fruit of that. But they're like, oh, no, that was it the whole time. We have no problem with it. All of a sudden, even though other properties, we hate that they do the exact same thing. They cherry pick when to be angry about something. And they're wrong about all of it. And they hate that I'm referring to all of that.
Yeah, well, bringing it back to the episode
Neil Gaiman doing work on Twitter, though, swatting down all the trolls, which is beautiful.
Agreed.
He's been staying busy.
His Twitter, his responses to all of them have been so good.
You hear it, Garth.
But bringing it back to the actual episode and Death in particular, if they watched the show, how could they be upset about the casting? She killed it. I hope she shows up when I die.
Yeah.
She did such a good job.
I would also be happy with Kat Dennings, though.
I mean, yes, but
they were different, but also both. It's kind of like Tom Sturridge and James McAvoy. They did it a little differently, but they both nailed it.
They had their own take on the character.
Yeah. And she was such a warm presence, and Neil Gaiman's personification of death has become one of the most popular in any medium, really. And I was listening to an interview with Neil, and he said he had to take Kirby aside when she was cast and have a conversation he doesn't normally have to have about the weight of this portrayal, because for decades people have come up to Neil and said, your personification of death has helped me get through real life trauma and death and tragedy, because I picture someone warm waiting for the family members that I've lost. And Neil told Kirby, it's like, this is what is now your burden, and people will remember you in this role for years if all things go well, which is a lot to put on somebody.
I think of all the people that got casted, I think she had the most weight on her shoulders, because that character, even though they show up briefly in the show, is massive.
This is kind of like a 2-part episode.
Yes.
But I want to ask Sean and Geoff what you thought of the more death-centric half of the episode.
Of the first half, basically.
Yeah. And then we'll get into the hobgaddling stuff.
It did its job and exactly what it was going for. And it definitely it made me cry like every single time she was collecting people. And she was just doing her job. She just has a job to do. And it's neither, good nor evil. It's just the job is the job, because that's human nature and that's our lifespan. But it was still, it's sad, especially when she goes, well, the foreshadowing, especially knowing it was coming when she tells the guy, hey, yeah, I'll see you soon. And I'm like, oh no, that's, she's going to
Franklin never saw it coming.
Oh man. Yeah. I saw that coming.
And then they go for a walk, and they collect the old man, who says the prayer, and they collect the guy who was swimming, and his wife is just sitting there at the shore, waiting. And then they go for the baby.
Bad.
And I don't know. I'm back and forth whether I like the Audible version more or the show, because in the Audible, the baby talks back. Is that all? And the baby says the line that Kirby essentially enunciates, and then you hear the mother screaming, like blood curdling scream, as it cuts off and they leave the scene essentially.
And I was waiting for it, and I almost felt like I took a deep breath when they cut before that. I was like, I think I'm okay. I think that again.
The weight of that scene did the scream without having to do the scream.
Yeah.
It was implied.
Because you have the visuals that time around.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm not great when it comes to seeing children or seeing children pass away on camera, like in film. It's obviously in films and television, I've watched plenty of stuff where that might happen, but it's more and more, I guess, as I'm getting a little older, it just leaves this pit in my stomach, and that part really, and it did it effectively. It was out of all the stuff that makes you emotional, it's suddenly I felt sick to my stomach for a minute.
Yeah, and I feel like it unintentionally brings up a topic that doesn't get talked about a lot as well, with infants passing away from SIDS and things like that too. I feel, it's heavy, and they definitely did a good job of dealing with that. Again, I'll bring up Tom as Dream, him sitting there watching, and I could see it on his face, this can't actually be happening in front of me. So heavy. It was great. It was so good. I loved it. And Jesse, I have a way to transition to the next part, but what are your last thoughts there that you wanted to share?
My next thought was basically going to be the transition. I was going to say I did love that they managed to tie in. Well, I'll let you had a transition, Mike. Go ahead.
Oh, damn it! This isn't my show. This is me being super talky. No, I love this episode, which was so focused on death. Took two of the best in the first 2 volumes there. Stories revolving around death, essentially. Death and life, and putting them into the one episode. So they contrast each other too, because the first half is so focused on death, and it's such a natural part of life, and that it's just something that everyone's going to have to accept, and they will accept one way or the other. And then the second half is about a man that will never accept death, and as such, he's never going to die. And that I thought was such a great way to put those stories in there, to have them be there. So you get to also see in that first half how much death actually affects Morpheus. And then to see someone who doesn't want to die, who has so much life in them, and it's teaching, you could see it in Morpheus's eyes, how he's registering it, how it's like this interests him. He's loving this. It's making him crack a grin sometimes. So
Like,
this was,
and you get to like the low point. You get the low point of Hobb, like he's lost everything's gone wrong, and you know, if you aren't familiar with the comic, you're gonna think this is the breaking point, this is it. This is when he's like, okay, take me now. And he's like, so are you ready for death? He's like, are you kidding me? It's a Mug's game. You know, and
you could see his face light up when Dream asked that. Like, of course not. This is fine. I want to keep living. Like, why would I want to give it up?
At his lowest point too, when he gets thrown into, you know, he's about to get thrown out of the tavern, and you know, Dream's like, oh no, he's with me, and you know, he asks him at the end there, he's like, well, you know, obviously you've lost everything. What is there left to live for? You know, he goes, would you like to still? He goes, I have so much to live for. Like, he just says, like, he knows that it's a roller coaster. Like, and he's at the bottom right now, but he's, you know, he's going to do what he can to go back up. And they played that scene so great too. I mean, I think it was the time jump immediately after that when he asks him, he goes, oh yeah, you're my friend. He goes, you're lonely. You just want companionship.
And the reason why you're doing this is because you needed a friend.
We had a running joke, Lauren and I, watching this about how dramatic Dream is, to the point it's hysterical. It's like, wait, did you say no to me? You're banned to hell for 10,000 years. You dare say I need your companionship?
She defied me.
Yeah. Or him,
but that's part of his character arc too, especially what we see at the very end. You know, in the like
you have
to
have
scene.
That hard ass Dream who thinks that he's all powerful to really make the where you get to in the story make sense.
And they honestly, at least at this far into the story, do a better job of showing that arc than I think the comic did, especially with how 10 wraps up, and we'll get to that. But honestly, I cried like twice in this episode for two different reasons. There was just with the baby or the guy drowning on
his
honeymoon, but then having Dream and Hobb reunite after he escapes, and you know, he missed the last date, and then basically admitting to being friends. I was like, well, this just makes me gleefully happy. Even
that was heartwarming for sure.
And like Geoff said, it's the dichotomy of like the two different prospects of death that are handled so very well. But any last thoughts before we move on to the last kind of chunk of episodes?
How dare you make me cry my own tears?
Yeah.
I don't
get
cry. It's a thing.
They got you with Gregory, and then they get you with the whole episode about death. They're just batting 1,000.
Pour one out for Gregory, by the way. Just one last time before we keep moving forward.
Yeah,
pour one out.
My heart. My heart breaks every time. Like, people keep posting about Gregory, and every time I see those like little eyes, I'm like, I hate this. Get it off my feed.
Like, can we just take for a moment? Yeah, that is definitely early Dream with all the hard assness about it.
But also, like,
he decided not to end up providing the Gregory sacrifice. Right. So Gregory just died in vain, it turned out, and then he just decided to be like, oh, it's a new baby instead. So yes,
well, he just needed the power.
Yeah.
Gregory, yes, I know, but still, it was the power, but also to trade.
Also, just to drop a little note.
Like, never mind.
Cain and Abel were perfect.
Agreed.
They're obviously not
they were great.
Like completely central to the story yet. They do some stuff a little later, but
perfect.
I
love who they casted for them, and the fact that they were able to build so much emotional attachment with them and Gregory in the beginning for you to feel that loss just right out of the gate. I was like, these guys did such a great job.
Well, I wanted to say, exactly what Cheryl's saying too. You could see that despite everything else, like Dream and probably most of the Endless they still have this morality about them, and you know, straight up says in that scene, you know, to his buddy, like, oh, you you live your life about choice, but you take that away from others. And that was a great piece of dialogue that you could immediately see it on his face too. He's like, yeah, you're right. This is not good. This is not something we should be doing. And Garth, this hurts my head. This hurts my brain.
It's a lot of things that I don't understand.
Yeah.
As soon as he says Gerving, you know he's going to get killed again. Yeah. And there's a lot of speculation that all the headstones and crosses and stuff in the cemetery are all Abel.
Are all
and
him.
That's my headcanon. It's hysterical and sad.
Yeah, I mean, it would make sense.
Yeah.
There are two houses, the House of Mysteries and the House of Stories,
House of
right?
Secrets.
Yeah. Aren't those both comics, like famous comic book stories?
They are old.
Where's Dr. Fate usually? Is it the House of Secrets?
He's normally in the Tower of Fate, but
okay.
House of Secrets and House of Mystery used to be pre-code horror books back in the day, before there was the like code of conduct thing for comic books that essentially made them all inappropriate for children. But yeah, they were big like horror anthology books where a lot of characters eventually ended up coming from.
To jump back, I think it was it episode 2, where we see the old lady talking to Joanna, and I didn't remember that character from the audiobook.
Mad Hattie.
Mad Hattie.
Yeah, she's in it.
Yeah,
Mad Hattie.
It's
okay.
Hattie.
Hattie.
She's outside, just rambling on about the Sandman.
She
says,
she I've been around for 280 years. She says.
I think she also pops up in Hellblazer as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, she's just like an immortal homeless lady.
Yeah, basically.
She's like there to share her knowledge.
She's like, what if that crazy person rambling on the street never died?
Was centuries old. Yeah.
Yeah.
She was exactly in the show as she is, to my understanding of,
From what I remember of the books, I think she pops up. And she's
I think
just
she
crazy
comes
lady.
back during the Martin Tenbones and Barbie stuff, doesn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's a little later. You'll see her again, probably.
That wasn't in, that was the Martin Tenbones and Barbie stuff. That wasn't at all in the first act of what I listened to, right?
When they start having the Dreams crossover stuff.
Yeah, when the Doll's House is the story arc, I think.
Not a lot, but I think you get a glimpse of them. It's brief again. Things stick out more visually than when you're multitasking and listening to an audible. Yeah. He wasn't in it much. He is very prominent in one of the future stories.
A lot of people were very sad when the visuals of Martin Tenbone showed up because they know what's going to happen to him.
Oh no. I haven't gotten that far yet. Because maybe I was maybe I was at work doing something, or I wasn't listening right, because I was like, what the hell is Barbie doing? Like, I was so shocked at that one.
She's in her own fantasy world, living her princess
life.
I
love that she's got her princess dress.
I just
didn't
remember it. Yeah, I know, right? It's like she's 8 years old, dressed up as whatever's in the closet type of thing.
Yeah.
Barbie, I cannot wait for the Barbie storyline. I forget the title of what that volume of comic is.
And I think it's all part of the Doll's House.
Continued?
Yeah, the Doll's House was a pretty big arc in the comics.
Okay.
They definitely condensed stuff from it, of course.
Oh yeah.
They definitely condensed it, because this is all of a Doll's House. I think that the Doll's House that they are adapting.
So currently in Act 2, I'm at the end of Season of Mist. I'm about to hop into Fables, Reflections, and Distant Mirrors, and then there's a Game of You, and a Convergence.
I'm trying to remember which one has they briefly, Martin Timbones mentions the Cuckoo, and the Cuckoo is a whole villain thing that Barbie has to deal with. That was one of my favorite things in the entire arc of Sandman.
Bonkers.
It might happen later. They might weave stuff in later on. So, but let's talk about what we do have here. I think that
circling back to
I for one I don't know if you'd care about the actor choice, but the fact that they had John Cameron Mitchell pop up was so bizarre to me, and I loved it.
I am not familiar with the actor, but Hal/Dolly,
the owner of the
Hal,
B&B, right?
He's the guy who wrote, directed, and starred in Hedwig and the Angry Inch.
Yeah, I see that as his main title.
He was in a Hulu show that I was familiar with.
Yeah, Shrill, which went on for 3 seasons with A.D. Bryant. I really like Shrill. I really liked him.
It was good.
Shrill. He's always a scene stealer to me, and I loved
big
it.
personality.
Like, wow, yeah, he's a big personality, and they're like, great. Let's put this big personality in the big personality of drag too.
Yeah,
and I love that they
insane
had
numbers.
him. I just thought that casting choice. I just really like John Cameron Mitchell.
He played Joe Exotic in the Kate McKinnon Joe versus
Joe
Carol
in the Peacock show this year.
Yeah, I never watched it, but that's hilarious. He is the Tiger King. That's
he looks like a great Joe Exotic.
arguably, the Dollhouse could be some of the most difficult aspects of Sandman to translate because there's like convergence of dream. There's the
they did a pretty good job of the melding of dreams in this.
Yeah, and vortex. I could not think of the word vortex, but trying to explain that to somebody that's through this visual medium, I thought could be really difficult. But they did it really well while tying in the serial convention and everything with the Corinthian. I thought that maybe 7 through 10, the quality was going to dip or I'd have more issues than I did. But I thought it went, not only did it mostly go off without a hitch, but there's things they added in elements they tied in together that were very nice. I thought they were going to completely drop the Hector Hall and Lyta's baby.
I was so happy they did that.
Where Lyta's baby is a big deal. I'm not going to talk about it a lot yet, but there's a lot there.
When they introduced Lyta as her friend, caretaker person, I'm like, oh, they're doing a completely different way about this.
Yeah, instead of having her mom there, they introduced Lyta earlier in the Hector elements. Like I said, like it's them sewing things together that weren't previously tethered, and I think it benefits the story overall.
Yeah, it definitely helped kind of connect more dots together. From all these things, because like we had said before, like the way the comic is written, it's so specific with the way Gaiman writes it, because there's main story threads, there's anthology storytelling in there, there's random asides, sometimes there's just a one-liner and then we move on. It's almost like, in a way, the storytelling in the comic is stream of consciousness a bit. Where it's just sort of like what he's thinking, just kind of throwing it on the page. And they did a great job trying to wrestle it all into something that worked in the television format. So I also was afraid that after the wild, kind of like crazy first half, and it's so interesting too, like the way that you actually broke up the review conversation is a great way to actually do so, because that's the structure of the series. The first 5 episodes are a contained story. He loses his things and he needs to get it back, and all the things that happen within that, and how they're tangentially connected somehow. The sound of her wings is, he has his stuff, and it's also now it's this where
it's a crossroads for Morpheus.
Yes, it is literally, because at the end when he's telling people, like when he's talking about stuff to like the Corinthian and whatnot, saying we are here to serve them, we're not here to rule them. And I'm thinking that is just something you just learned in the sound of her wings. So that also adds to why that episode was so great.
An interesting change that happens in here that you guys will be familiar with is they changed, I cannot remember the exact names, this is like Group and Glop or you don't talk about the two,
Glob, I think.
Yeah, the two nightmares that were kind
Galt.
Of they were shepherding, and like they were in the dreams with Jed, and they turned it into Galt. And I was like, oh, interesting choice. I wonder why they did that. And it's like because they use Galt as part of like a redemption arc for Morpheus. Yeah. And I was like, yep, I'm digging that. Once again, like they made a change that I'm like, I'm good with this. This is cool.
And Galt themselves, even though they were a nightmare, they were basically protecting Jed and like protecting his emotions, his mental faculties while he's in this freaking obviously terrible situation, being abused by these foster parents. Allowing him to be a superhero in his own mind when somewhere he can escape.
Corinthian kill a few more people than he did in the comic, because
he killed a lot of people.
Corinthian took out the foster parents, and Corinthian also took out Funland. And I don't think Funland died in the comic. Morpheus was like, go to sleep, and gave him like a dream. And I was like, you can probably kill him. That's okay. I'm alright with the Corinthian taking him out.
Well, yeah, because
He's
Funland gets a little further with
and it's Rose more so than
with
Jed.
Rose, yeah.
Yeah.
Also, you're probably familiar because the whole dream with Galt and Jed is a nod to the original Sandman.
Yes.
And
it was Hector Hall in the comic, right?
Yes.
We
Because
see
Hector and Lyda like created their own world, and that's how that baby happened. They didn't do that. And I'm kind of glad they didn't do that because it gets real confusing real fast in the comic
like I
books.
said, there's a lot of Dollhouse that's very convoluted. And I remember even like listening to the Oddballs, like, what's happening?
Yeah.
But yeah, the kid's Sandman costume is the same.
As Garth is saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a moment that go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say that one thing that I loved about the Galt thing, I'm a nightmare. It's like, well, nightmare that just wants to be a dream, and what's his name? And Dream going, well, no, you can't do that. This is your function. You cannot be that. Anything else but this. And he treats, and he changes his mind later. He's adapting. But also, like, they definitely said in like episode 2 that Gregory was a nightmare before, didn't they? They said that he was a nightmare before he just became their pet. So it shows
this was Cheryl was
there's
asking,
history. There's history of that happening.
Well, and then they probably won't touch on this in the show, but in the comic books and the new Sandman universe stuff, which is the continuation of Neil Gaiman's world, there is another nightmare that ends up not wanting to be a nightmare, and he actually fell in love with a human, and they allow that to kind of play out. And it's very fascinating, like how nightmares can grow, just like people, because they are just people of the dreaming.
There's a brief moment with Jed as the Sandman that Lauren and I have really fixated on, and it's when he's like, "I'm the Sandman," and Morpheus is like, "You're the Sandman," and that like little bit of acting right there is some of the most charming things that like Tom Sturridge does in the entire show.
Like the way that he delivered that line was like a kid ran up to him and they were like, "I'm a superhero," and you're like, "Oh, really?" Like totally that vibe, and it was great.
When Morpheus, and it's very different than Batman, but it's a similar effect to the reason that we get so impacted when we see Batman smile is because he does it so rarely. And I think Tom Sturridge brought a lot of that to Morpheus. He's very stoic. And so when he smirks just a little bit, like he does in Hell a couple times too. Like, I got one up on Lucifer that they don't know what I'm about to do. I love that. And
I think somebody in the chat earlier said that every time Dream smiled, my heart grew 10 sizes.
That would be my wife.
That's his wife, Lauren. I think that another great
until we
thing
find out Tom Sturridge is single.
Garth, very limited.
His performance is also in that effect very similar to like Ryan Gosling in Blade Runner 2049, which is very reserved, like, I'm doing my duty type performance with moments of, there's definitely rage and other emotion that's somehow always kept down. He has very few moments where he has any outbursts or shows any emotion throughout the entirety of Blade Runner 2049. And the same with Sturridge there. But like the difference there, what's great is how he does so much with his eyes.
Yeah.
Throughout this whole season, because he's like constantly almost on the edge of like tears,
crying,
or like really like depressing. He's like constantly about to cry, and I'm like, this is the best sad boy. You're a good sad boy.
Oh man,
I instantly like completely rebuked a review after watching like a few episodes. I was looking, and I, for some reason, found myself on Rotten Tomatoes. And
bad place to be.
Bad place to be sometimes,
especially for a DC property.
And like,
you go looking for shit, you're gonna find shit.
Well, my curiosity got the better of me because I was like, this show is damn near perfect for me. But yeah, it had like 86%. So of course I was like, what are the rotten reviews? And so I started reading them, and one person just opened up with like, the show's mostly fine with the exception of Tom Sturridge's abysmal performance. And I was like, right out, immediately out.
I feel like people who say that aren't familiar with how that character was written to begin with in the comic book.
Right.
Even James McAvoy's version is very dry.
I think that to actually be in support of their comment in a way to push back against yours, I don't think that you need to be familiar with a comic book or any other versions in order to feel like you can judge this specific version. And in that respect, this is an issue I've had with Dream as a character in the comic. And like you said, like, oh, well, if you're not familiar with it, of course. But like, that's a problem, though, in the comic that translates in here, which is like Sturridge is good with what he's supposed to be doing, too. But at the same time, this is one of those cases where it's happened a lot, especially with some fantasy stuff and whatnot. It sometimes feels like the least interesting character in the show is the title character. And it's everything happening around them that's interesting. So I get where that can come from. I think it's a matter of your mileage vary. If you're able to attach onto someone who is trying to be so unfeeling and whatnot.
I
If you
do
don't
agree.
attach to them from the beginning, it can affect it.
I do agree. The character of Dream or Morpheus is so hard to read because it's very like stage actory. Like he's reading lines, and that's what it sounds like. It's not very emotional. There's not a lot to it.
I do appreciate the show tries to like help with that a little bit by giving him an arc and having the stuff with like Galt and having.
By the end of it, he has a little bit more emotion in his voice, and it does follow the story arc pretty well. But it can be tough to get into for sure.
If she's still watching, Cheryl, because she's of everyone in the chat and us, she's probably the least familiar. She doesn't know nothing about the comics, the Audible, nothing at all. She just went in and watched the show, and fell in love with it. So maybe that's a great question for her.
Yeah, how'd you feel about Tom?
To let us know. Yeah, how'd you feel about the main character and versus everything else around? What was the most interesting part, essentially?
Yeah. I feel like Sandman as a whole kind of. Dream is just the center of it, and it's all the other stuff that is interesting happening around him.
Well, here's something that we have not brought up really that I think is a couple things, but one we haven't really talked about Lucien at all,
right?
Which is fantastic. One of the things that I do think is an improvement overall from the source material, maybe one of the things Neil had a chance to sit with for a few decades. But they gave Lucien more to do and much more of a character. And not only that, the little added spat that her and Dream have, I thought was a really welcome addition. And I love that Dream had to seek out information from Lucien with his tail between his legs because he was an asshole.
Yeah.
Well, that just ties into the whole character arc of Dream as a whole. Like, you literally didn't come back, and this person took your place essentially and made sure things didn't completely fall apart.
Right.
And then you come back and literally shit on them and like go back to your library and do your job. This is my job when they did it for 100 years without you. I think that was super important for Dream to have to go through. And Lucien,
that's a great comment by Tracy.
Yeah. Lucien as a character was fantastic. I'm glad that the character had more time in the show.
I agree.
I think it's a great comment there.
Well, yeah, because
in a way, it serves its purpose well, not about a story about whispers and other people. Sure, and that's
he's the controller of dreams, and he's going in and out of people's dreams. So it's really other people's story that he just
isn't that what the Lord of Dreams is meant to do? Is to inspire others, and that's what we see him do specifically with William Shakespeare, which ties more into Act 2.
I'm very excited to get to the Shakespeare of it. And that's another thing, kind of like Nada, that if you don't know the whole story, you're probably like, okay, why was that?
I can't wait for Midsummer.
It's coming. Like there's more like you got to kind of look as the whole story. But I get that some people that have no introduction. I'm curious if anyone that had no prior experience with it was enjoyed the Shakespeare stuff.
That is a big cliffhanger that they just left in the middle of the hobgoblin stuff. Yeah. Like, that's Will Shakespeare.
Yeah.
What?
What? Yeah. Oh, he'll be back. Speaking about episodes,
well, they gave him his other
9.
Yeah.
Shakespeare or whatever. Yeah.
Is it Shakespeare?
No, it's Berg. Something Berg.
Shocksburg or something like that.
Shakespeare.
Speaking about episodes 7 through 9 too, I think they could have gone a
10,
lot
Sean,
harder.
There was 10 episodes.
Listen to me. 7 through 9. They could have gone a lot harder with the serial convention. And I'm glad they didn't, especially after having episode 5. being so unnerving.
We didn't get to go into their dreams, which I don't think we got to do in the comic, and I liked that touch.
But it was minor in just a few characters. I just mean like I know maybe it was just the maybe it was the child molestation part of it when I was listening to it, and I'm just like, I want to murder this motherfucker right now. Like just thinking about what this dude is about to try to do to Rose and obviously her brother in the show, but to Rose in the Audible, I was just like, I don't even want to listen to what's about to happen because I didn't know where it was gonna go and how far it was gonna go. I was just like, I want to turn it off right now.
I think they probably made that creative choice to not lean it more towards the like psychological horror side of things, because if they would have gone into all of the people's individual backstories and dreams at the serial convention, it would the last 3 episodes would have just been a horror show, and I don't think that's necessarily what they wanted. That glimpse in their dreams was fantastic, like, and then all of them coming together. I thought that was a good touch, but there was a lot of sensitive content to deal with. And a character that we haven't really talked about that I do want to touch on as we get into these later episodes.
I wanted more of Stephen Fry too. That just speaks back to what my
I was hovering over it.
And that just goes back to what my original my one gripe about the show was. I just wanted more of these awesome characters and these fun characters we got, and we didn't get enough of them.
In the books, and they made this choice because they kind of at the end of this they condensed a lot of things. You spend a lot more time with Fiddler's Green and Gilbert in the comics, and you do in the Audible book as well. But
he did a lot with a little, though.
Yeah,
I love Stephen Fry.
As soon as he popped up on screen, I was like, this is going to be great. I love this guy.
I love Stephen Fry. He starts talking when she falls asleep to his voice. As he's talking before she falls asleep, he's talking, and I'm like, God, I forgot how good of a voice he is for narrating. I mean, he's great in some of the the Little Big Planet games, like, and I think he's also a voice in like probably Hitchhiker's Guide and other stuff. Great voice.
He's in V for Vendetta, yes.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's in V for Vendetta.
Yeah, he's the he's the
show. He's the news host guy.
Yeah.
Well, he hosts like a variety show where he makes fun of the Chancellor relentlessly, and then gets spoilers.
I will say for you, Sean, like if they do anything like they did in the comic books, you will get more of Fiddler's Green, whether or not he's voicing him, because we will have to see, but that character is still a thing later on in the story too. And I both, when I watched it for the first time separately and when I watched it with Lauren, we audibly gasped when he turned back into Fiddler's Green and started like turning into like butterflies and forestry and stuff like that. And I was like, man, they did spend the money on the show. And that was like not only like a nice effect, but it was beautiful. And the music, and I want to talk about the music. It'll be like one of the last things closing out here. But that was great to look at. Jumping off of what you said, they definitely spent a lot of money on this show, and it has me scared for the future of the show.
That's true too. I don't. That's true too. How about? Well, I guess they're already filming it, but I was going to say, how about Sandman season 2 instead of Witcher season 3? Like that's. Witcher's fine.
I don't know if I can agree with you there, but we'll agree to disagree.
I still haven't finished Witcher season 4, season 2. I'm on episode 4 of season 2.
I'm reading the
books. None of us.
I'm reading the books now.
They haven't finished it.
Season 2 doesn't have enough Jaskier in it.
I hopped into Witcher the third game. I never played the first 2, and I loved it. I was like, oh, this is great. And then, of course, the first season was awesome. Henry Cavill. And I started watching season 2 while I had COVID. And I was sick in bed, and I couldn't pay attention because I had a splitting headache.
I just never went back. I started playing The Witcher 3 the first time I had COVID. So.
Yeah.
He just like went up, said hi to you, and then went back to the window. So Goose is having an interesting relationship getting to know Shane. It's fun to watch.
Yeah.
Oh, he said too late.
Yeah, I'm here for The Witcher, but I also want more Sandman.
He'll be free for Flashpoint reshoots then.
If you cancel all your garbage reality shows, it might equate to half the budget of Sandman. So.
Wait, hold on. Don't you know? According to Warner Brothers, reality TV brings in the money.
For the female skewing
For the females,
audience.
you're right.
Yeah,
You're right.
right,
I'm
right,
so
right.
sorry.
By the way, speaking of the Warner Brothers thing, like this is on Netflix,
Yes.
owned by Warner Brothers, and it is just distracting to me. Every episode,
The logo.
This is a Warner Brothers show. Here's our logo.
This threw off
Because of
my
Netflix
fiance
and
when
them,
I was
so
watching
sad.
it. My fiance was like, I came home from work this weekend and I was like, I'm going to watch Sandman. And she was downstairs watching something on Netflix. And I went to go watch it, and we don't pay the $20 or whatever to stream on multiple screens. And I was like, well, looks like I'm not watching Sandman right now. And she comes up and she's like, this doesn't look like Sandman. I was like, it's on Netflix. And she was like, oh, I thought that was a DC thing. And I was like, yeah, they just were the ones that had the money.
That is the first thing I say in my reaction video for episode 1 is, oh, Warner Brothers, they're having a tough time.
To say the least.
Oh, something happened in
it
Vermont
hits you.
recently.
It hits you in the face.
Hey.
Anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Any other things that you want? I love the final confrontation between Dream and the Corinthian. I like that they dragged it out more, because it was very much kind of like Dream just washing his hands of Corinthian in the comic. In this one, he stabbed him in the hand because he's like, as you know, Rose grows the vortex, you are losing power.
We haven't really touched on Rose either in that whole story, the Unity Kincaid stuff.
Yeah. And I liked the addition to, like, Desire was always behind the majority of this, but then, and I felt like an idiot because, like, was it episode 8 maybe or 7 or something? Unity says that she had her husband, or the father to Rose's mom, was this like
Rose's
golden-eyed man. Yes, yeah,
great granddaughter.
Yeah, was this golden-eyed man, and I didn't think anything of it. I was like, that's weird. That's a weird thing. I'm sure that means something, but it didn't click in my head. And then about the same time it clicks for Dream, I was like, oh, I'm so dumb. And that was something that they added that I thought was great. And we finally get to, as we're wrapping up, the one that everyone's been talking about, Mason Alexander's part as Desire.
I'm just going to interrupt you.
Everybody's talking about, we just talked about Stephen Fry and Fiddler's Green and Gilbert. I 100% want more of Desire.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Like the way they acted that role.
Yeah.
So good.
And like everybody was
just
well cast,
enough.
But Mason felt like another level. And it's funny because, have you heard the story of how Mason was cast?
Probably somewhere in the last couple years of Sandman stuff.
Mason, very shortly after Neil announced that Sandman was going to happen, Mason reached out via Twitter and said, hey, Neil, have you cast Desire, and what's the name of your casting agent? And Neil's like, went to Mason's like Twitter, looked up some of their work, and then gave Mason the casting director information. And then a couple weeks later, they had their Desire.
Boom.
Yeah.
Hey, sometimes,
the power of the internet.
Yeah.
Reach out.
Yeah.
And the opposite of that is apparently Patton Oswalt was cast before they did anything else.
Yeah. Do we want to touch any more on the Rose stuff or
stuff to come, or just what happened to this?
Because I feel like those 3 episodes, there's so much happening with that character that we haven't even really talked about.
And Rose was great. I really liked her. Yeah. More than the audible version, to be honest.
Oh, really? So I'm kind of the opposite. Not that this Rose was bad. I just wanted maybe a little more emotion in certain scenes where I felt like there should have been a little more, not even like urgency, but just like there's some freaky shit happening. You should be reacting a little differently, in my opinion. But you know what? That's on the director and the actor to make their choices. So
I will also say the colored dreads that Rose had just really made me want to see Delirium.
Yeah.
Because that just screams Delirium to me.
I can't wait. That's another thing. God, if this doesn't get season 2, it'll be all 13 of my last reasons. And the seeing more of the Endless and getting Destiny, Delirium, Destruction.
Well, we didn't even get to see all of them together.
Yeah,
which was kind of sad.
Can we please get, if we're gonna bring in any of the casting from the Audible, can we please get Jeffrey Wright?
I was literally just about to say, hold up,
Playing
Jeffrey
Destiny,
Wright, who is the Watcher in What If, and then does the same thing as Destiny.
Absolutely,
be the same exact character.
And I just got to the part in Act 2 to where Dream is talking about talking to Odin, and I'm pretty sure it's Bill Nye, right?
It is, yeah. And again,
I can hear Bill Nye. Yes, Odin. Yeah, 100%. Let's go.
so many
Kristen
of the awesome.
Shaw is Delirium. That sounds like perfect casting.
Again, almost like 90% of the Audible cast. I'm like, you could have plucked any of them.
Yeah. But I'm glad they made this different and let the two live on their own. Like, yes, I would have loved to see Kat Dennings' death, but also the death that we got was also fantastic.
I really like.
And the same with the rest of the
characters. Only one, like, now that I've seen it, I'm great with everyone, and the only one I'm like, wish we could have stuck with is probably Andy Serkis, I guess. Yeah. It seemed like it would have been an easy choice.
Yeah.
So this is a good question too, because I don't remember the prodigal being any
destruction.
I was I was confused by that.
So
I forgot to bring up.
The prodigal is destruction, and he's
been gone for centuries. Right?
Been gone for centuries. Is one of the endless that just up and quit, stopped doing their job. Spoiler alert.
Yeah, and I don't remember a whole lot about destruction because destruction.
You see him in the comics.
Yeah, out for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't see him till like the last couple volumes of the comic book.
Right.
But they always are all sad about how they're missing their sibling.
Well, there was no reason to bring him up in this season.
Well, the only reason why they might bring it up is because when they go into their rooms where they can,
there's no sigil for
destruction.
There's no sigil there to call upon. Mm-hmm. And I think that it's also important, though, on top of the sigil thing, just because he's also a great example of, because they're just like, well, you were gone, Dream. So what were we supposed to do? Because it's to show like they didn't know what to do, but also like, all right, well, what's the precedent for this? And that's destruction. So I think that was another reason why it was just a show. It's not the first time, and it seems like no one's very happy that it happened before. Yeah. So, like, of course, there was not going to be all sorts of positive things of him because people might have thought that he might have intentioned that. Some people didn't actually know, maybe.
Yeah,
so. I thought he was going to play it very hurt when he's talking to Death and he says, "Oh yeah, I was locked away," and she goes, "I know." I'm like, well, fucking, why didn't you come break me out? Like, if you knew, I've been back for 7 hours. You knew about this for how long?
thinking about Overture a little bit more, then thinking about his time for like over 100 years in this glass chamber as a prisoner. In Overture, there's a point in which like he is at the center of like a black hole of nothingness, because this is the only way to stop everything that's happening. It's how he got so weak, it like affected why he got so weak in Overture. And it's like at the last moment he's going to officially just be gone from things, and Destiny pulls him out, and he's like, "You didn't have to come save me. I'm not saving you. I'm just doing this exactly in the book that I'm supposed to be doing now." And I just find it so funny that Destiny, I can't wait for Destiny to show up, because Destiny is a great example of just like, we can literally just comment on our own storytelling now through Destiny. So that'll be very cool. But yeah, as for Rose, I didn't say anything on her. I thought she was great. I really like Jed. And I thought there was a lot of interesting stuff with her too. So,
Skarsgård or Pablo Schreiber?
Skarsgård,
who was already in American Gods. He has a relationship with Gaiman.
Yes, he does. With Gaiman.
Yeah.
Gaiman.
What is this Gaiman? That sounds like a kaiju.
I think it's pronounced differently. I don't know.
I'm pretty sure even he pronounced it.
I don't know. I haven't heard it.
All right.
It's pronounced Constantine.
Constantine.
What are you doing?
Your cat wants to be a part of the show.
So neurotic. Come here.
It's Leviosa.
It's a kitty. It's a kitty.
One of the last things I want to bring up before we wrap up into our final ratings and things like that is I know nobody really listened to the score by itself, except for I did at work a little bit today. What did you guys think of David Buckley's score? I did see Sean bring up the name David Buckley in his reaction to the show.
I did. I went back and looked at it afterwards. I was like, put it right there on screen just to make sure I remember that name, David Buckley. I thought it was great. I love the score. I commented on that in the first episode as well, and it carried over through all the episodes. Did not get a chance to listen to the score back because I thought there was only 9 episodes. I didn't realize there was a 10th, and I was like trying to time out. I was like, cool, I'll have an extra hour or so before we start this review. Oh no, wait, I got to cram in another 50-minute episode.
How did you feel about episode 9 being a season finale?
That's why it was so weird. I was like, I had paused it because like my kids were talking to me or something, and I'm like, how are we going to wrap up so much more shit in the next 20 minutes? Like, there's a lot that still has to happen. And I was like, this doesn't make any sense. And as soon as the episode ended, I'm like, oh, of course, there's another
next episode.
Yeah. I know. I just thought there was only 9. I didn't realize there was 10. I didn't look at like the episode list as I was, watching through. So
I had to look through the episode list to figure out how I was going to fit all this in a weekend.
Wing fail. Yeah.
I loved finishing it and watching all the various conversations I had on different social platforms of watching people catch up. And I'm like, but I also got a little bit of a head start because I got to watch episode 1 on last Wednesday because I've been so obsessive that I signed up for everything that I could.
While I was working.
Anyways, I thought
David Buckley tweeted Neil Gaiman.
Yeah, I did. And he's like, did you check your...
He responded.
Neil Gaiman responded.
Did he respond to you?
He responded to me and he said, did you check your junk folder? And I did. And I was like, oh, there it is.
One of my favorite internet interactions with just the creator of something you're obsessed with.
Yeah.
I was at the fair listening to the Audible and my kids were like waiting in line for a ride. So I figured, hey, you know what? Let me do like an AMA, and I was listening to the Audible. So I tagged Audible and I tagged Netflix and then so Audible just started having a conversation with me on Twitter. Like, what do you think of the show? I was just going back and forth for like a day and a half. I was like, I love it.
A comment I want to make on David Buckley is, of course, when he was announced as the composer, I was like, what has this man done? And I looked at his IMDb and I was like, Bourne movies, Nobody with Bob Odenkirk. And I was like, I don't get the Sandman flavor vibe from his previous work. But it just shows I know nothing about anything because it was great. It's fantastic.
I love the
even
Bourne
better
soundtrack
when you listen to it by itself.
For me, the soundtrack did its job. Like, it didn't really like stand out, and it never really took the attention away from anything, as a good score should. It should set the tone subconsciously for you, and it did that. I haven't listened to it
it's fantastical when it needed to be fantastical.
Exactly. And I think the trick to writing a good score is being able to be out of the way of what's the most important going on, which is the dialogue and what's happening on screen, and just kind of supporting that. And they definitely did that. I'm excited to listen to it on its own so I can give it its full appreciation. As an avid soundtrack listener and score listener, I am looking forward to it.
Same. There's always there's what kind of score is going to stand the test of time type of thing. Is it the score that complements the movie and sets the tone for while you're watching the movie, or is it the score you can listen to and then you can see the movie in your head or the show, as you're listening to it?
Man of Steel has entered the chat.
Man of Steel, Tron Legacy. So many Hans Zimmer scores, to be honest. Like, you can kind of just listen to on their own.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh, I love Pirates.
Yeah.
You ever listen to Fury Road on its own?
Yes, Junkie XL. Oh, dude, 100%. I love that score.
But one of the comments you said, it's like, oh, well, this doesn't all seem like the tone for this stuff. Ludwig Göransson was doing like producing Childish Gambino's jokey rap music, and now he's an Academy Award-winning composer for Black Panther.
I mean, I'm a big Trent Reznor.
He also did the score for Venom.
Yeah. Another one, a great
Trent Reznor, 9 Inch Nails do scores for Pixar now, so
right.
No, not only that, like, you think of 9 Inch Nails, and then you kind of think of some of the work that was in Social Network, where it's like, okay, I can kind of see like bits of stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But then it's like, okay, cool. in 2020, we're gonna bank and soul.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
different.
Yeah.
Listen to Hurt and then listen to Mank.
Yeah. Exactly.
It's weird seeing that. And I think Geoff, you were talking about this on some show, like Hans Zimmer, like he did like Driving Miss Daisy, and then
He
you
did
know
like
the Dark
the
Knight trilogy,
internship.
and the Lion King,
not the internship.
and
The Dilemma.
the
He did
Dilemma,
The Dilemma with
Yeah.
Vince Vaughn and Kevin James.
and he did
directed
the
by
Holiday with
He
Cameron
did, like,
Diaz
all
and Jack
these
Black.
Random. He's done
That's
all
such a
these
good
random
movie.
things, and
Which
he also
one?
does all these
The Holiday.
giant.
Oh,
The
yeah.
Holiday, I love that movie.
Yeah, The Holiday. He's done
Yeah.
all sorts of like random things. He's got an
And-
Oscar for The Lion King.
Yeah. But back to David Buckley too. I love the Bourne scores. Did he do all of them? I didn't look up his filmography.
I
Did he do
think
all of them or just
so.
the most recent? Okay.
I think
Because
I think including Legacy. I think.
You can hear
I'm
the
looking. I gotta pull
you
right
can,
here.
you
Let me
can
see.
hear like that sharp twinge, like duh, and then it goes into like a poppy, like it gets like the blood pumping type of thing, mixed in with like the music too. So I can hear that too. I can't wait to listen back to this. Probably tomorrow.
Looking at his filmography, like his actual discography under Just Films, where he was the composer, he did Jason Bourne. He was not the composer on the
for the first three
other ones.
Oh,
he does have a handful of additional music credits on other stuff, but none of them were that. Like he helped do music, composed additional music for like Flushed Away and Shrek the Third and the 50 Shades.
Those classics.
Movies, all three of them.
Well, then hopefully this could be
so
a
the 50
jumping off
Shades,
point.
He did
for
the
him.
whole trilogy.
He did the whole trilogy along with Danny Elfman. End of sentence. I don't know why. I was glad it sounded like keep talking.
I mean, that's good
There's something
company
else
to be
coming.
in, but
He had, I mean, in between all the 50 Shades movies, he also worked alongside Rupert Gregson Williams to do Wonder Woman.
Hey,
that was a solid score.
And
was
before that,
solid
he
score.
worked with both Hans Zimmer and Rupert Gregson Williams on Winter's Tale, which is that movie where Will Smith shows up the devil.
Yeah.
That is super.
how about that? Okay. All right. Wrapping up because we're hitting that 2-hour mark, and we've all
Has
been
it
here
been
for
2
a while.
hours? This is like
It
any
has.
day talking to my other friends.
I mean, it's true. I had to look up at the clock, and I was like, "How much more do we
Well,
have
it
to
doesn't.
cover?"
We
All
just
right.
have the timer there telling us how long we've been streaming, not an actual clock.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so we're going to wrap up with our final ratings, and I want to start out with the person that has. I'll start out with our guest today, Shane. How'd you end up feeling about the season 1 as a whole?
So, are we doing this as like out of 10?
Well,
How
out
do
of
you guys
10,
normally do
I
it?
think out of 10 is how I usually do
Okay,
it.
Out of 10, unless you use decimals, then do it out of 100 because that doesn't make any sense.
understood. This definitely is
I'll
like,
accept grades too.
Okay, so I'll do both. So this is definitely like high 8s, like middle 9s for me. So like B+, A- type area, because there's very few things that I really can nitpick on this. I enjoyed it all the way through, and the changes they made just made the story make so much more sense. The visuals were great. I'm excited to explore more of the dreaming in this way, and I just love these characters, and I'm so happy that we finally have it after all this time. And overall, just super ecstatic about it, and I can't wait to see if anybody else takes a jab at old DC Vertigo, because I have such a soft spot in my heart for DC Vertigo titles, and they don't get as much love as I think they should.
Not Vertigo, but let me get that Justice League Dark. Goddammit. it.
Yeah, we'll
Before
see.
we get any more ratings too, Cheryl gave it a 5 out of 5, but Cheryl, Garth, Tracy, anyone else we still have in the chat, once we do finish, do me a favor, refresh the
Why
page.
does it?
and
Why
put
does it
your
have to be?
put your rating in the comments after, not just the live comments, but in the show comments afterwards. We appreciate you.
Yes, please. And why does it have to be a tip of the hat from Sherlock? What about that beautiful hat that Dream had back in the flashbacks in episode 6?
We didn't even talk about the tie.
His OF and his hair changes.
Man.
Oh, Cheryl did earlier. She wants a collage of like all of his emo boy looks from throughout the years, throughout the 100 years.
So
It's on
good.
Twitter. It's on Twitter.
I can't wait to see all of the comic book nerds at the Ren Fairs dressed up in various forms of Dream.
Mhm.
Dream's outfit changes in this season look like the entire outfit influence, like the outfit history of like Brandon Urie and Panic at the Disco.
Garth gave it a 5 out of 5, and Garth, I see that. Thank you very much, buddy. So I'll do it in the ASMR voice.
It's got to be your dreamy ASMR. Get that audible voice going.
Did you all let the end credits play out all the way through on each episode with the changing art by Dave McKean from the comics? It was lovely.
I did
That might
for
have been
the
too
last episode, and I'm going to rewatch it because my fiance wants to watch everything again, and I am watching them all the way through because Dave McKean is one of my favorite artists on the planet, and the fact that he took the time out of his busy art life to do the end credit scenes is
gorgeous,
awesome. He's one of the reasons why I even picked up the books to begin with.
I love the artwork. I love that they did that. I almost want to go back and just watch the credits for each episode because Netflix. I almost always love this, but for this show, when it's like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, skip credits, and I'm like, no,
yeah,
I want to.
They do give you a watch credit option in the top corner, but you have to move the cursor to do it.
Well,
it's so fast. It's like watch next episode within like 4 seconds. I'm like, I didn't even get a chance to lean up from my chair.
It's faster than the time it takes for me to turn my Xbox controller back on that has automatically turned off. And so I just, they got skipped, and I feel bad about it.
I did for the last episode exactly what Jesse just said. Or I'm sorry, what Shane just said. But then they started playing a trailer for Uncharted. And I'm like, why? I didn't
well, so that was about to happen for me, and it did the countdown. And I was like, there's the watch credits button. I can't. I'm not watching this Uncharted trailer right this second.
I don't need that.
It came on like 30 seconds after the credits anyways.
Yeah.
Well, Sean, how'd you feel as a newcomer to the Sandman universe? What'd you think?
I feel like we got another Streamlabs, and we appreciate you from Retro Game Collective. What a fun live panel and review. Thank you so much.
Hey,
you're welcome. Whoever
Game
Retro Game person is, we appreciate you.
That's awesome.
I honestly don't know who that is. Because that's not a name that's in the chat. But thank you for watching.
Unless that's Tracy, say hi in the chat.
Is that Tracy? Tracy, if that's you, thank you. Awesome.
It is Tracy. Thank you very much, Tracy. We appreciate it.
That is so sad.
You look like a new name, so we appreciate you hanging out with us for the last 2 hours. We've been here for quite a while. I think I give it a 9 out of 10. I really love this all, and honestly, like Jesse, like pressuring me into listening to the Audible ahead of time, I think definitely enhanced the experience.
I only know Obsessed.
See,
I only have very few ratings.
I think it almost would have been better to have the viewpoint of somebody going in without prior knowledge. But kudos to you because the Audible is great.
That's how I usually like to do things, to me, because I watched Dune without ever listening to the book, and then over the course of the next 4 or 5 days, I listened to the entire audiobook afterwards.
The Dune audiobook is on my list because I watched the new movie, and I'm like, this is everything that I enjoyed.
There's my Art of Dune book if you want to check that out.
I'm not a huge reader. The only thing I've ever read outside of school was Harry Potter, basically. So going into the Harry Potter movies, having read the books, I was like, critical, and there's so much they left out for time wise and this, that, the other. And like watching stuff like Game of Thrones or Lord of the Rings, like I haven't read those stuff, so I had nothing to compare it to. And I almost kind of, because typically the book always has more information, it has more things fleshed out. So I didn't want to necessarily, but it's not that I didn't enjoy the experience. I enjoyed it either way.
That's funny to go back that way because like I had the problem of when Tom Sturridge was just announced, I had already started listening to the Audible, and I was like, tough for you, Tom, because James McAvoy is the best that ever did it.
Yeah.
And then I watched the first episode on Wednesday. I was like, well, shit.
See, for me, I had a different experience because everybody like rants and raves about McAvoy's Dream. I enjoyed it, but I definitely don't think he did it as well as Tom Sturridge, in my opinion. But I also relate McAvoy to a lot of the other things that he did, and he sounds like McAvoy. So having this new actor doing Morpheus was, I think, a way better take for me.
In the long Back to my rating. I think 9 out of 10. I enjoyed it a lot. It wasn't absolutely perfect. I think I shared, but it was minor gripes, which just doesn't make it a perfect show. I don't know if I have any perfect shows. Shows lend themselves too much time to do something wrong.
It's true.
Versus a movie where it's shorter. You know, you got an hour and a half to 2.5 hours type of thing.
It's one of those things too where it's all subjective. Like the creators were doing what they thought was a 10 out of 10 because that's what they were wanting to do, and not everybody's going to have the same opinions.
Joey over here on Twitch throwing out party emojis. Thank you, Joe, for showing up.
Party. Geoff?
I'd probably give it like 8.5 out of 10.
So 85 out of 100.
So falling along the general consensus of approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
I come on the lower end of the consensus among the people on the panel here, but
true.
I said like high 8s, low 9s.
Yeah. I mean, high 80s to low 9. Like 85 is like a solid B, but like in my mind, it's also like sort of B plus. Maybe it's like 87. There's so much stuff I love about it. There's things with the effects that are, some of them are gorgeous, but there's also like the whole standing in rooms with green screens thing that's very like, it's very false.
I think that's going to start to go away in media, though.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way where
it was also
like
so dependent during this pandemic.
But it's like, because there's all sorts of great things where it's very obvious they're all on stages or something. But it took me out of it a bit, and it's just something that's going on with a lot of big stuff at the moment. So they're all minor things, but those minor things add up. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. I think the situation with Desire's realm, that made total sense for the actual story. So that one I didn't really give them.
That was also a very built set. Like you see some like behind the scenes photo, like all of the Desires thing was.
So they definitely did better in some of those instances than others for sure.
And I'll wrap up real quick. I think I'm probably on the high end, barely. It's not a 10 out of 10, but it's like between 9 and 9.5 for me. Again, very, very few notes. I think I share some of the sentiments as my panel members as far as complaints go. I just maybe feel less. I guess nobody really feels strong, I think, about a negative, it seems like, but I think I just feel even less so about it. I'm just like, yeah, that's great.
I have a pretty strong statement. Like, for me, this is probably my favorite comic book adaptation that has ever been done. I really enjoyed it quite a bit more than...
It's one of the most straightforward adaptations we've gotten from a comic. Like, usually things take inspiration from, and this was definitely like, no, this is the story of Sandman.
And that's what I wanted out of this.
Yeah.
I think that it's very rare for a faithful comic to actually be effective in its, or a faithful adaptation to be effective. Because like, if you think about it, like, and I'm someone who actually kind of likes Watchmen. As someone who's
I like the Watchmen movie
person.
Yeah.
But I kind of like the movie, but also like, you know, changing the end aside thing. It's like just a series. It's almost like Instinct in the way that it just kind of pulls everything from the comic and just makes it what it is on the screen. But it also feels like you don't feel like so much of what you feel when you read the book. There's this huge absence of I guess like emotion through it and like how it's supposed to make you feel in the movie. Like it's not there. I think that this show does a great job at making you feel what Gaiman wanted you to feel on the page as well as on the book, and you could tell where he wanted you to feel something different or what he decided he wanted to change, and that it all makes sense. And there are things that don't always work, but you could feel why they did it. And for that, I think it's admirable. It's considering how difficult this material is. The fact that it works at all, let alone how well that it works, is a testament to, I think, how good it is in general.
Here. What Garth said, I loved the Watchmen TV show. I don't know how faithful that was to the comics because I don't know the Watchmen.
The show is a sequel to the comics, so
okay.
Faithful. It's faithful.
It's faithful in the sense that you get the raining squid.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Faithful in the sense that it's using the comic the graphic novel as history in their
Zack
world.
Snyder movie, in that
Yeah.
the Zack Snyder movie threw literally everything from the comic at you except for the raining squid.
Mm-hmm.
And this show gave you literally nothing from that comic except for the raining squid.
Yeah.
Since it's a sequel story.
Shane, you haven't seen Watchmen yet?
I haven't watched the show because I want to
so
read the graphic novel before I watch the show.
You should read the graphic novel and watch
I
the
have
show,
it. I have a physical.
movie. Yeah.
I have a physical copy of it.
Have you not read Watchmen yet?
I'm very young in my comic book reading life. I only started like 5-6 years ago, so I'm a Sandman fan, a Hellblazer fan, a Swamp Thing fan, a Batman fan. So there's just a lot.
Hellboy.
I've read all of the Hellboy stuff.
I highly recommend that you read it.
I have so many Audible credits. Maybe Watchmen I'll do next.
So do I. It just keeps telling me I have these credits and they're about to expire, and I never use Audible. And then it just keeps saying they're about to expire. They've been expiring for 3 years.
Well, it's because you're still paying $10 a month and you get a credit a month.
I have like 12 credits.
And I keep getting my wife telling me, "Hey, cancel that because you never listen to anything." So,
Watchmen is on my to-read list. I have it at home on my bookshelf. I just have to.
Well, now you have Act 2 of Sandman to finish, and then you can start Dune Messiah, which is a book.
Yeah,
we get time.
Apparently, also
before the second half of the first movie.
All right, cool.
Messiah's not the best.
Well, I know the Dune universe has a lot of books, so that might be a lifetime.
I think Frank Herbert's son Brian took over, and in total there's like 16 books.
Yeah,
Frank
wrote 3 or 4.
Well, and I also
I'm
just
gonna
started
watch
Witcher, and that's 9 books or something.
I'm just gonna watch the James
I think
McAvoy
it's
sci-fi.
2 hours and 16 and 15 minutes into the stream.
It all circles back to James McAvoy.
Yep. Always.
Really quick. Some flick and reel plugs on the way out. As we were talking about earlier, Sean's got Sandman episode reactions. So if you want to rewatch and revisit or just share it with any of your friends, check that out. I believe it already has like over 200 views. Is that right? Something like that.
Yeah.
And then episode 2 right around the corner, correct?
Yes, I need to finish editing that tonight, so it'll go out tomorrow.
Scary.
We need to let him get to his editing. It sounds like
that's true.
Yeah, and we're gonna try to drop them every other day just to give me time to edit them down.
And speaking of coming out tomorrow, we also have the latest episode from the lovely Allison Solomoni. You've never seen it, where she watched Zodiac for the first time and breaks it down with special guest Lon Harris. Any fans of the Schmodown would be familiar with Lon, so check that out. I believe it's already up on the audio platforms if you want to do that, but it will be on YouTube tomorrow. All right. With that, let's get into our places we can find everybody. Geoff, where can the people find you?
You can find me at GEOFF1106. That's at Geoff1106. That's my Twitter handle. You can follow me there. I'm still doing Spin from the Real Schmodown stuff, or whatever that's worth, while it's still alive and kicking. I think it's alive. I don't know. I thought it died.
It's more like alive and twitching at this point.
It's a chicken. It's a chicken with its head cut off. It's still running around.
We still have great matches to come.
I think that they should just cancel an L so nothing else is shown. Especially not this one specific thing that's going to be coming up very soon, which is a great segue into Sean. What else do you have going on?
Watch the Schmodown on August 26th when I have the very final match ever filmed in the regular studio, barring Spectacular, which they've still yet to film. But we had the very last match ever filmed, which is myself and my partner, Miss Glory Jean, taking on a returning Mark Andraco, former teams champion, and a newly minted teammate to Mark Andraco, Mr. Kevin Smets. And it was a great match all around. So watch to see what happens. See who comes out on top. And at Sean Wingblade on Twitter and here on Flick and Row.
Yeah.
Shane, is there anything you'd like to plug? Anything that you're doing?
Not necessarily, but I mean, if you liked anything that I was saying tonight, I am at Comics with Shane on Twitter. I'm way less active in the media world as these guys, so there's not as much out there to find me at.
And I am, of course, Jesse Swift, and you can find me usually on here a couple times a week filming shorts and reviews and doing news and views talks and Friday night speakeasies with Mr. Sean Wingblade and whatever guests we may have. Also, you can find me on Twitter at Jesse Swift, easy enough. And also, because I'm starting to post a lot more movie content on there, you can find me on TikTok at the now revitalized at Flickin' Real. No space, all lowercase. That's how that's done. And yeah, Twitter, you can find me discussing about how annoying this whole woke thing is, people having problems with it. Anyways, and you'll probably continue to see me talking about Sandman, and once I get tired of that, I'll start talking about Dune Part 2.
Or we might have to start doing comic stuff again.
Yeah, or that. Go out there and get my first volume of new saga material. But anyways, it's been an absolute blast having you gentlemen on here and talking about my favorite thing. I don't know what I'm going to do after this. I guess She-Hulk comes out in a couple weeks, so stay tuned for that. That's coming around.
Doesn't it come out like next Wednesday?
It's like August 18th or something
Thursday.
like that.
That's
next Thursday. It's a week from. It's 1 week away.
All right. Well, how about that? All right, guys. I've been Jesse. There's Shane.
Thanks
Geoff,
for having me.
Sean. Keep it real. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.